for being here. Welcome to the podcast.
I am so excited to do that. Thank you for having me, Lenny.
It's my pleasure. I don't actually do conversations like this often with early stage founders, but I'm really excited to be doing this because I feel like the journey that you've been on over the last 6 months is kind of like the dream for a lot of founders, especially founders that don't want to build massive teams, that don't want to raise a ton of money. Basically, the journey you've been on is build a product. People loved it. It grew like crazy. You didn't raise any money. You sold it for $80 million. We'll talk about this 6 months in. And I know it's not all rainbows and butterflies and this amazing, happy moment to moment all day, but I know it's a lot of hard work. But this is just what a lot of people want to achieve when they start a company. And you're just in the thick of it right now. Like you've just announced your acquisition. So I feel like this is a really unique point in time to extract as much wisdom out of your head as possible.
Really the right time to kind of like reflect back. And
Yeah, I think there's going to be many more times, but this is a really unique time. Let's start with a couple basics. Just what is Base44 for folks that aren't super familiar with the product that you built?
Base44 is an AI app building platform, meaning that you're able to use natural language to describe what you want to build, an app, a game, a website or something like that, and then have AI code it for you. We're not the first ones doing that. I think it's a very crowded category, but I think Base44 takes a very different approach, a very opinionated one, and one that users like to call it a batteries included approach, which means that for every app that you build in Base44, you already have built-in included a database, integrations, user management, analytics, without connecting third-party services or bringing your API keys and so on. And I think it helps a lot when you're trying to scale a vibe-coded application to be very complex and very functional. And so, I think for most of the category nowadays, they're doing a fantastic job, one, with building React web apps, like front-end web apps. And then when a user needs some backend stuff, they have a great integration with Supabase. Supabase, I think, is the most common kind of like thing that most competitors use. And honestly, all of them are doing a great job with the integration, but as the nature of an integration, I think it's potentially slightly less strong than building everything full stack built in. And once we did that, and actually I engineered the endpoints and the SDKs and whatever to work well with LLMs, I think Base44 does a really good job with building very complex and functional real-world applications.
Okay, I want to talk about the origin story of just like how you even realized that there was an opportunity here. Clearly, it worked out. But before we get there, let me just share a couple stats about this journey to give people a sense of just how crazy this is and add anything I'm missing. So in 6 months, you went from zero, basically nothing, to selling this company for $80 million plus to Wix. It took you 3 weeks to hit $1 million ARR. You bootstrapped this business. I think you put in a few tens of thousands of shekels, not even US dollars. You have something like 400,000 users right now. You're a solo founder. There are 2 different wars involved in the journey. You're based in Israel, so you have to deal with that. And we're going to talk about some of those stories. Any other stats that are worth sharing? Anything else that's important, high level, before we get into the origin story?
No, I don't think so. I think it like looking back, it sounds insane, but mostly this is it.
Okay. I love that perspective. Okay. So how did this start?
There were 2 things I think that drove me to it. One, my girlfriend needed like a website to capture leads. She has like a small business. She's like an artist. And I tried building that with like one of the tools out there for website building, not an AI powered one. And it was such a pain trying to do that. One, kind of like designing with the drag and drop and everything. And then things get messed up in mobile and you try again. It's like, and then how do you manage your data and so on? And in my previous company, we dealt a lot with LLMs. And while I was doing that, I was like, it doesn't make any sense. I know models can write the code to do exactly what I'm trying to do right now, like build a website for my girlfriend or build like slightly more complicated than a website, was actually a web app. I know models can do that. They don't have the right infrastructure to do that. So like if I set up an infrastructure for like, hey, here are the leads, go to the database, like, okay, you can write React code and it will serve it and it will be great from an SEO perspective and so on. Then I'll know there's like it's going to be super easy and she could do it on her own. And the other trigger, I was volunteering to help with the Scouts organization here in Israel, with like everything that has to do with like system and software and back office systems that they needed. And back then, it's a huge organization, by the way, really huge, like tens of thousands of people. And they have many, as any other organization in the world that we're currently living at, has many software needs. And so every time they needed to build something, they didn't have any internal devs, any software engineers. So they'd reach out to other agencies, and agencies usually would quote them like $1 million just to build something that I knew people could build. I was, and still, by the way, a huge fan of tools like Retool for like the previous wave of like no code tools. But then those tools were really more of like low code tools, right? You still needed to know some JavaScript, something to make them work, to have the interaction right. And again, also back then I was like, I know for the software and systems that they want to build, I know it could be done. It's just LLMs can write that, and we can really empower the organization to build all the different tools that they want. Just give it the right setting, the right infrastructure, so that the LLM has access to a database, maybe to another LLM to build like the app on top of AI, to have some user management, to have all those kind of things that it needs, but it can translate the user needs to actual code. And so those two were triggers. Back then, I started a company 7 years ago called Explorium, very different than Base44, very much like enterprise top-down sales in the data space. Very capital heavy. We raised $130 million. I was a CEO for 7 years. Then when the October 7th war broke out, I went to reserves for like almost a year. And then when I came out, I went to travel the world a bit just to take some time off, and wanted to do what I liked the most. And I haven't had a chance, because Explorium grew and grew. And haven't had a chance for a while to do, which is coding. Wanted to get back to building and get my hands dirty. And so I had those, like, given those experiences, both with my partner, my girlfriend, and also with the Scouts, I was like, let's take a shot at it and start the product that I know is going to be very, very fun to build. And I think when you're approaching it this way, and like not the usual way of like, let's raise a ton of money and try to own the category, and I knew I was getting into a very crowded category. I also knew that I have like some different angle and some different take on the category. But when you're approaching it this way, it's like there's not a lot to lose. And I think it gives a lot of energy. And that's how Base44 started. It definitely didn't think it's going to take off so fast. But yeah, that's pretty much about it.
Okay, I like that you don't take credit for the work you did to help it take off so fast. I'm excited to talk through that. Just first, a few maybe takeaways from what you just shared of how this idea emerged for folks that are looking for ideas. One is clearly you were solving somebody's real problem, your own problem, helping your girlfriend build this website for her, and then working with the Scouts program in Israel, basically building them software. So I think that's a really important takeaway. You weren't just like, hey, maybe this will be useful to someone. It's, I have a real problem. I want to solve it, and nothing out there is good enough, so I'm going to build it myself. The other is you said that you're having fun. Feels like that's an important element. Just like you should enjoy it. You shouldn't feel like it's some kind of drag.
You know what? I feel like when I was a first timer, when I first started my first company Exploring, I felt like many smart people told me those two very important truths. Is like build something that you would want to use, or that you'll actually use, and make sure that throughout time you keep doing something that you really like. And so when you're first timer, or at least for myself, when I heard those kind of things, I was like, yeah, those are cliches. Business is always important. Let's increase revenue. Like, let's close more deals. And I feel like those are, even though it sounds like a cliche, it's so much easier, one, building something that you'll actually use. So I actually tried solving both problems. Like, I was building the product and at the same time developing those two products for my girlfriend, for the Scouts, and later on also for other friends and family. And we'll get to that. That's how I got kind of like my first couple of users. but super important to build something that you'll use. You'll move forward so much faster, but also doing something that you love. I think I was the CEO of Explorium for 7 years. It was such a fantastic experience. It had so many highs and lows, but at some point it grew, and it took me too much time to realize that what I really like doing is just building products and scaling products, and not necessarily like being a CEO, managing sales, managing HR, managing all those kind of things. And I think that gives a lot of power. Like it's easier to work very hard when you're doing something you really like.
Let's follow that thread and talk about being a solo founder. I think this is something a lot of founders like. It's hard to find a co-founder that out of the blue when you have an idea. YC famously doesn't like solo founders. So I think there's a lot of power in what you've achieved. So let me just ask you, first of all, any, I guess, lessons about being a solo founder that you think would be helpful for other people considering starting a company on their own? And also just how do you stay productive? How do you get stuff done as a solo founder using AI?
One, solo founder and specifically bootstrapping, it's not for, like, I don't think it's suitable for every use case, right? If you're building like a B2B company, especially if you're like doing a B2 enterprise company, like you'll need to hire a salesperson or a sales team. Like you'll need to like spend your money on marketing. It's going to be very hard to try to sell to a company when you're on your own and nobody knows if the product's going to stay there tomorrow. So I don't think it's like the right setting for every company. I feel like if you're building something that has the potential to be viral or to target the masses, and so it doesn't really matter if you're like funded or not, you just like build a great product that people will share. If you're able to do that and you're able to get out of like the escape velocity of getting to product market fit, then everything is better doing a solo bootstrap than the other way around. One also, like, even from a pure cold angle of like the financial outcome, obviously if you're able to bootstrap your business and again get out of like the escape velocity, be profitable to some degree, then you'll likely generate a financial outcome that's, I think, for most cases way better than any other thing. Second is, so not specifically the solo but the bootstrapping thing, less stressful. Like you wake up in the morning as like, if you're profitable and there's like, I think there's like this term default alive. It's so much easier. I've done both, and the weight of raising so much fund, even if your investors are great, and my investors were awesome and they were always supportive and so on, but even so, I feel like being bootstrapped, like no other money except of yours in the business, and the business is growing and profitable, I feel like can keep the energies up. And I think I keep, like, one thing that I've learned from my previous company is like energies are super important. Usually it's a marathon. For me, it was a sprint. I thought it's going to be a marathon, but you want to do something that you like for years and years. And if you're able to show up every day, then your chances kind of like goes up immediately. But then there's like a lot of downside and a lot of stressful moments doing that. One, just keeping the software up, keeping the servers up. When you're solo, you don't have a DevOps team, you don't have on-call, you don't have anything. I think it's really tough. I had a few accidents that really, I'm joking about that, but I was saying it to my friends, like, shortened my life a bit with just like the stress. I had one funny, now I look at it as a funny moment where I was at my brother's wedding and we were doing the photo shoots. And I was actually the one was supposed to also do the ceremony. And then doing the photo shoots, I have a friend from MIT calls me up and he's like, hey, somebody hacked into Base44. And it's like a crypto scam. And you've got to take care of that because people are building apps on top of Base44 and they're putting the data inside and so on. And I remember like hanging up the phone. I was like, okay, I'll take a look at it immediately. And I remember hanging up the phone and saying, I know, like, it's karma. I know for a fact it's true. Somebody probably hacked into that, because what other are the chances that on the only night that I'm not able to open up a laptop and handle that, this is what happens. And so I threw out there some excuse and like I have to go and like practice towards the ceremony or something like that. open up a laptop, spend 2 hours, 2 very scary hours of my life. It ended up being just the LLM tried using a package called cryptography, which is like a Node.js, like a JavaScript package, has nothing to do with crypto. But obviously the user, not a technical user, saw this error of like, hey, something cryptography or something like that, was sure that someone like a crypto scam hacked into their app. And so you have a lot of those like moments that the whole thing is like you're not able to share it with anyone, share the burden even, or the stress, or put anyone on top of it and say, hey, you know what, I'm out for today, you handle that. In my previous company, my 2 co-founders, we were really good friends, like great friends. And even if one of us would mess up, then still would have someone to share it with and run jokes around and like and just be there with someone. So when you're solo, it's hard. And then brutal prioritization, which is something you have to do because you have to keep up the pace of the product. And obviously nowadays with AI and like everyone can build software, like you have to go extremely fast on one side, and on the other side figure out marketing along the way and how to do that. And every time I remember that every time I had this ceremony where I'd start the day and try to look inside and ask myself, what do I need to work on today? And what do I want to work on today? So what I want to work on today, it was always like, I want to code. Like, that's what I like to do. Let's improve the product. I know there's like a bug that makes like annoys some of the users. I know there's like the feature that's in my head that I'm saying, oh, competition haven't thought about that. I have to build it. I have to put it out there to be in front of everything. And then it's like, what do I have to do today? And so at many different stages on Base44's journey, it was, I know I can like improve the product a lot, but I need to do some more marketing. Oh, I need to, like, I know this is not the bottleneck. I know people are like converting well, they're growing, retention is looking good. And it's all about just like increasing the audience, even though I know like I need to, like, even though I really want to work on the product. And so I think it's like this context switching is hard. Yeah, and the last piece obviously is I was spending a lot of my time on making sure that my setup, like how I code, how I write content, and so on, is optimized and everything is automated. And so I spent a lot of time thinking and agonizing about how to structure the code repository, for example, so that I can use Cursor for backend and Base44 for frontend to write like code really fast. And this was like really important for me to keep kind of like trying to find out new ways of like how to automate and increase the pace of like building solo. Because if you're able to crack that, I feel like smaller teams with a lot of context nowadays can move faster. And the same goes also for marketing, is like and for other tools where you want to automate as much as you can, especially when you're solo, because time is going to be like the thing that kills your business if you're not managing it right.
Okay, let me follow that thread. That's a really interesting topic. So what is in your stack of productivity for yourself, and then just that allowed you to build Base44, just like the tech stack of Base44? So you said Cursor, Base44. What else did you use day to day that helped you be more efficient?
So I have severe ADHD. And so it can also be like a superpower, but then you have to like the first thing you want to do is like make sure that your work day looks like that you can be focused and that you get like a lot of like deep work. And so I use a product called Rescue Time, which I really like, but I think there's like a bunch of other products like shuts down every access to Twitter and LinkedIn and so on. This was really hard because I was starting to like do this build in public, which turned out to work pretty well for Base44. And so every time you want to like take a look at your post or see kind of like how many likes and like impressions and so on, but then like you can't work on anything else. And so I had this first setup that really like allowed me a certain set of software tools that I can use to manage kind of like deep work. Cursor has been awesome. Base44 not only did like the work for the front end side, but also a lot of like the business apps that I used were on top of Base44. So where I'd manage users and give credits and where I write content. And then like I had this app where I kind of like at the start of the week would write some like high level content ideas. And then the Base44 app will take it and break it down to kind of like something that sounds more like me for a LinkedIn post, and then I'd approve that, and then it would break it down to like a Twitter post. And so I wrote things that were like really customized to my process and what I wanted to do, which really helped. But I think you can do that not only with Base44, you can vibe code your way into like productivity tools that really fits what you want to do and what kind of like the process for you looks like. And I had, so again, for example, for my social posts and so on, there's like a process that I would follow, and maybe no one else would follow that. And so vibe code, the custom app for that, was really helpful.
Let me actually ask about that. That is super cool. So you built basically internal tools for yourself using Base44. People can use other tools potentially. So you built one that's like, help me craft a tweet. How does that actually look like? What is the input? That sounds really interesting.
So the way that I like to work is like, I would have those moments where I would have inspiration for like a piece of content, right? So the way I grew Base44, probably a different topic, but was a lot around building in public and growing an audience and speaking to my audience, which were fellow builders. So it was really easy. So a lot of that was like around sharing on like the Base44 journey. And then I'll have a process that I'll follow is like I'll write down before that on a piece of paper like some ideas that I had for like post for throughout the week, because you want to keep consistency and keep putting like great things out there. And then my process before the app was like I'd go to ChatGPT, I'll write like a very vague kind of like structure or skeleton of a post and tell it like, hey, fix my writing, improve my writing a bit, and then ChatGPT will spit out something that was like too far off, too much, like too salesy, not my tone. And then I'll say, no, keep closer to the original, and we'll fight about that. And then like remove the emojis, the hyphens look weird, and so on. So, okay, I'll have now my LinkedIn post, and I'll need to generate an image for that. So I'll go to a different tool. And then I'll take this LinkedIn post, and now, okay, I need to like put it out also in my Twitter account. So, okay, let's break it down to a Twitter thread. Now you need to shorten you need to make some adjustments to the content. And so I've taken this entire process, which I think was like what was working for me, and just vibe coded it up around it to help me speed it up, and then made sure that the LLM inside the app was using my own tone of voice and was saving the previous posts to understand how it looks like what are the posts that I really like that I've written beforehand, so that in the next post it will speak just like me.
This might be a good plug for Base44. So like say someone were to go to base44.com and try this out. What would be a prompt you'd suggest? Like how would they get started building a tool like this?
Usually what I'll do is I'll write down, I think LLMs nowadays do a very good job with like start vague. It's going to build the skeleton for what you need. And Base44 does a good job with that, like understanding at least the big pieces. Okay, there's going to be an LLM writing the content. There's going to be this and that. And so you don't have to like write the entire spec. It's just like something like, hey, I want to build my own content generation, AI-powered tool. Here's my process currently, and my process is doing this, and then LinkedIn, and then Twitter. Write something to support that, and then from there iterate. And also something that I really like with the entire category, again, not only Base44. I feel like there's tons of tools doing a great job, but something I really like in Base44 is that like you can, because it's really easy to change the software, it's like you get this adaptive software. It's like as you improve your processes or maybe your processes change, it's like you adapt it. So like Base44 got acquired by Wix 2 weeks ago. And so now the process of like putting content out there looks a bit different. And so with like just 2 prompts, like you change it to support your new process, which is really fun.
That's a cool phrase, adaptive software. I heard malleable software is another way to describe this. I want to talk about growth, but a couple more things real quick. This idea of bootstrapping, I'm curious. So essentially you're competing against very well-funded companies, Lovable, Bolt, Replit, V0, Vercel, Cursor raised, I don't know, $1 bazillion at this point. I know you're not competing with Cursor directly. If you weren't going to be acquired by Wix, did you plan on raising money? Do you think you had a chance staying bootstrapped, competing against the folks that everyone's the more popular products today?
Base44 was like very profitable, much more than what I thought. So even if I wasn't getting acquired, I thought like I can make good money out of it. It ended up like, I remember I had like a very failed product hunt launch at like mid-January, and then started writing some started building in public at around start of February, and that's where it took off. And then started like, I think first dollar or like the first 10 or $100 were towards March. And then in May, I already did close to 200K in profit. And so I think either way there was like a room to compete. And even though it was small, I was seeing that the users that come to me that come to Base44 stick with Base44, even though they're very familiar with like the rest of the competition. The challenge was obviously making as much noise as the other folks. So you can see like the other vibe coding tools doing like $1 million hackathons and so on, and they're doing an awesome job on growth, really. But I didn't have the resources, so I tried finding ways to fight the fight. I think we had a very successful hackathon for good, which turned out to be a great growth engine, and also did good in the world, which like we had 3,000 teams just building some great do good apps. But also, to be very honest, I think part of the reason to get acquired is because this market has been moving so fast, faster than anything I've seen, faster than what I thought it's going to move. And at some point, I feel it's going to be like, you see Base44 grows and you start thinking, hey, this can really help people with their lives. Like this is like one of those software categories that I'm saying that I'm very not objective, but I feel like can really move the needle for a lot of people. I've been seeing people build like fantastic, awesome things. And so I was like, let's go for the big one. Let's try and actually build some global scale, maybe lead the category, maybe win it. And I felt like the best chances to do that is to partner up with Wix. There's like plenty of reasons to that. We can touch on that later, but like same DNA, same customer base, like they know what they're doing, they're seeing, and obviously like very good connection with the entire management team over there. And so I feel like the acquisition, again, being very honest, I felt like it's going to be a financial success either way, but the acquisition is like taking a stance and saying, you know what, let's play in the big league and let's punch down, not only punch up when fighting in this very crowded space. And that's part of the reason why to get acquired.
That was really insightful. So part of what I'm hearing is you could have stayed independent and made a really good income and built a really good business, at least for a while. Who knows what would have happened long term? But if as a solopreneur, as someone that's never raised money, you can make significant income doing something like this in a crowded space if you have something that people love that enough people love. So I think that's a really interesting insight. Like, it's okay if there's $1 bazillion in funding going to competitors. There's a big market here.
Yeah, I think it's a bit different ball game right now. I was scared many times. Like I thought, how am I gonna go into the fight? Those companies are some of the fastest growing companies ever. Again, they're like great teams and very well funded, and a lot of money being poured into. But then, like throughout time, I saw that I'm able to keep the pace, if not even have a faster pace and have like a different angle, and it's not changing over time. So like nobody's like, and so I think it's a different ball game, because even like if you're a very small team, or even if you're solo, like you're literally managing like teams of AIs, like writing code. I don't think I've written a single line of like HTML or JavaScript in the past 3 months, but still like the Base44 front end changes a lot because AI writes that. So yeah, if you have an interesting angle and you're able to move fast, I feel like money and funding is not necessarily the factor to win a category. And that's going to be like, and that's going to change even more drastically in the future as LLMs get better. It's like people like 10x engineers would have way more impact. They're going to be 100x engineers because they're able to manage LLMs, and it's not necessarily the team size nor the funding that would be able to win you a category.
And what you just shared is amazing, that you haven't written any you said JavaScript to HTML in 3 months, which is half the lifetime of this company, which sold for $80 million and more potentially. It feels like now the big things you got to get right is kind of like at the beginning of figuring out what problems to solve and being really good at understanding where the gaps are. And then it's distribution, marketing, getting people to be aware that you exist and give you a shot.
Yeah. And even distribution, I'm still learning that. It's like even distribution nowadays, it's very different, and also in favor of like the solo, not necessarily the solo, but like not necessarily that you're gonna pour a lot of money on paid campaigns. Like Base44 grew with close to zero marketing budget. I spent like $2,000 on an influencer post that didn't really bring anything, and then tried paid for like a couple of thousands of bucks. Didn't really work, and so everything was like organically and built in public. And so even distribution is very different. But yeah, if you have an interesting take on a domain, Base44's first user was one of my best friends. Like we grew up together, and up to a few months ago, he was a restaurant manager. And then he left and started like a SaaS company for managing invoices for restaurants. So this is a guy that has both distribution. Obviously, this is very local, like software and company, but has distributions, like has those connections, but has a very deep domain knowledge. And now that like the technical, he has no, like him and coding are like very different in the very different places. And so I think if like domain knowledge become or domain expertise and some, again, interesting take on a domain or a product or a category becomes like a key thing. And then distribution, yeah, that's a hard one to get, but also a world that's changing a lot.
Yeah, and I love that you did it with no funding. The other thought here as you're talking is it feels like you could have kept doing this and made money and lived a great life, but there's this question of how ambitious do you want to be? I've gone through this myself where I was like, oh, this newsletter is, I'm making a living off this, writing one email a week. I could live really well just doing this. But then I'm like, oh, why not do a podcast? Why not do another podcast? Why not do some other stuff? And the reason I do that is that just like, it's kept boring to do something the same way forever. And there's this opportunity that's out there. I'm like, I should do that. And I feel like some people are on it. I just don't need that. I'm good. I'm going to live in, I don't know, Fiji and just code and make 100, 300, 500K a year from this thing. But I feel like folks like you, like there's more ambition. And one way is raise a bunch of money, another sell to a company that has a platform that you can build on.
Yeah, I emphasize with this a lot. But the funny thing is that like Base44 for the first time in my life was not trying to build the biggest thing ever. So I remember like when I started exploring my previous company, I was so so hung up on like, let's raise the most amount of money in the least amount of time. I remember that I kept looking like, hey, Explorium raised $100 million before Snowflake. This is insane. This is amazing, and so on. And I did that for 7 years. And I think Base44 is the first time that like I stopped and said, you know what, I just want to go back to do what I really love, which is just building a product. I don't care if it wins the category or not. I don't care if it's going to become really big or not. I remember when me and my girlfriend got back from like the trip to Asia, and we were on the plane, I told her, hey, you know what? If we get to 1.5 million, I don't remember why I said exactly this number. Like if we get to $1.5 million in ARR till the end of 2025, we're gonna buy a nice car. And we got there in like 4 weeks. And so it was the first time of like saying, let's not try and build the biggest thing. Let's just do something I really like. And let's just build a product that I'm gonna enjoy building. But then at some point it got to be very, very successful. And I think it comes with like, once you're seeing success and you're seeing like true positive impact on people, then you're saying, okay, you know what? Let's go for let's play in the big league and try to scale it.
That so aligns with my journey. I saw similarly, I'm just going to do a newsletter. Life's going to be great. I'm not going to build, I called it my anti-empire. I don't want to build anything big. I'm just going to keep it chill, project avoid getting a real job. That's what I called it. And I think that is a really big insight. Some of the best stuff comes from not putting a bunch of pressure on yourself, trying to build something huge, and just following a pull, following your interests, following just that insight you have, ends up being some of the best ideas come out of that and the biggest ideas.
I love it. I agree with that. Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Content Square, the analytics platform that helps companies build better digital experiences. Ever wonder why customers drop off before converting? Or why some pages perform better than others? Content Square takes the guesswork out of digital experiences, giving you real-time insights into how users interact with your site or app. With AI-powered analytics, automatic frustration detection, and clear visualizations, you'll know exactly what's working and what's holding your customers back. Whether you're optimizing an e-commerce checkout, refining a B2B lead flow, or improving a mobile app experience, Content Square pinpoints exactly what needs fixing and why. Content Square powers better customer journeys across 1.3 million websites and apps. Discover the insights you've been missing at contentsquare.com/Lenny. Let's talk about growth. So here's what I want to do. I want to talk through just how you got the first users of Base44. So I'm thinking maybe, how'd you get like the first 10 users? How'd you get the first 100 users? How'd you get the first 1,000 users? What are the levers used there? What are the tactics? So let's start with 10. How'd you get your first 10 users?
Just begging people close to me that I feel like that I have really good connections with to use it. I feel like there's no other way. And maybe there are other ways, but again, I was very new to like B2C, like to consumerish type of product. And so I started with even 3 users, like really close friends. 2 of them back at the time, I caught them in like a part of their life where they were unemployed. So I was like, hey, why don't you try build a SaaS business or something like that? And so 3 really close friends, where somehow I got them to sit down with me every other day around the table, and they would use the tool. They will try to build something. It will break. I'll take a look at the logs. I'll go back to my computer, try to change it, push into production, and then just build it for them. I feel like plenty of people are lucky to find maybe a method that consistently works for your like 10, 100, 1,000 users, and then from there. But I try to look at it as like milestones. And so first I was like, I'm not going to try and scale anything before I know that users enjoy it. And the best metric to seeing them enjoying it, or at least making value out of it, even if they're not enjoying because there are plenty of bugs and slowness and so on, is that they're starting to share it with someone. So I haven't invested anything in marketing before I felt like, okay, for the first 3 or 5 or 10 friends, at some point they started sharing it with their friends. Like you'd see, okay, there's like 1 new users today and then 2 new users today and so on. So once it started happening, even on very low percentages, because Base44 turned out later in its journey to be very viral. But back then it was like an okay product. People loved it and all liked it and started sharing it with that. And so once I started seeing that this works, and we got to like 10 users, were all my friends, and then the 11th user or something like that, started seeing people that don't really know me. That's why I knew, okay, now it's time to invest in marketing or try to launch this thing or try to like get more people to use it. Because if you try to do it beforehand, I feel like you're going to waste a lot of time and resources on just like having a very revolving door. Like you get users in and users out, you will not be able to, and unless you have like a lot of money to invest in paid, so that like it makes sense, then it's very hard. I knew that I'm not going to do that. It's like a product that I'm building. I want it to be profitable from the get-go and not feeling bad for investing too much money into paid and so on. And so I knew that it has to be viral. At some point I saw that it's starting to look like it's viral. Then I did a very failed, very bad product hunt launch. But also now looking back, I'm saying this is completely fine. I feel like people sometimes treat their launches, like product launches, as like make it or break it for the company. This wasn't the case for me. I was like, this is a tool for me to get to my next 30 users, my next 50 users, and that's exactly what happened. And so first product hunt launch, we got like 50, I got like 15 new users. By the way, the second one broke product hunt. They thought it was like plenty of bots. We won the first product of the day and the first product of the month, of the week, but it's a different story. And so we got like 50 users and we got the first user to pay. this was an insane feeling because I'm like an entrepreneur coming for like the enterprise space. I was thinking that this is insane. Why would anyone pay for my product without meeting me, without like looking me dead in the eyes or trying to get a discount and so on? Obviously, this user churned in like a few hours because the product wasn't good back then. But from there, I started seeing some very slow growth. So I got my first 50 and then 20 left. And then the other 30 started sharing it with like other users that were really good. And then I tried a bunch of marketing things, didn't work. Influencer post or paid or something like that. And then one of my friends was also a founder in a different space, told me, hey, you know what? I think it's really cool that you're building it on your own and that you're trying to like take a very different approach than the usual VC funded way. Why don't you share like content about that? Like the end of the day, it's like you're gonna have the same, like your audience are builders. They're trying to build their own products or maybe even businesses, and it will likely resonate with them. And so I started sharing the journey on LinkedIn. And I remember like seeing posts like, okay, there's this nice concept of building public, and people get really interested. And I think here in Base44, I had like this really nice synergy between the building public and also my audience was like builders, right? If I was like building, I don't know, a product to attorneys, then probably this wouldn't have made a lot of sense. Once I started like sharing what I'm building in public and getting more users and improving the product tremendously, I was so lucky. Like the community around Base44 is nothing like I've ever seen. It's like so supportive. There's so much feedback. And so from the loop of like improving the product, this is exactly like how people say it should feel like, is like people asking for features before you can actually build them. They're getting so excited about your product. They're writing the nicest things. People have started writing like, hey, you changed my life. I wanted to build. I had that like those ideas throughout my life. I didn't have an ability to do that, or resources or money to pay for developers. And then the other thing that I did, it worked really well, is I've noticed that people really like sharing what they're building on top of Base44. Like they would write posts. I remember at some point, a friend of mine reached out and he was like, dude, how much are you paying those people to like write posts about Base44? I was like, I'm not paying anyone, honestly. And so what I did is I did this program inside Base44 saying, hey, if you share just about the process of building the app or the app itself, it doesn't even have to be about Base44. If you share it in social, you'll get extra credits to build. And so those two, like building public and giving out credits, worked extremely well. And that's how we got growth going.
Okay, let's pause there. That was awesome. How many users do you have at this point of the journey, roughly?
I think there was like a week between having like being on a pace of like 20 users a day to seeing 4,000 users come into your product, like new users a day. Break the product, like it was hard scaling it. Also, there's like some things I needed to learn while moving. It's like, okay, I wasn't a DevOps engineer. I don't know how to scale databases. I didn't know that a virtual CPU would really come back at me when trying to scale and so on. And again, trying to be profitable. And so you try to use every free tier that you can. But then once you start scaling, it's really bad. So yeah, I think once I started sharing in public, it grew to a few thousands a day. And then from there, the credit thing like did the rest.
Okay, so this is kind of like the whole journey. I know there's a few other elements I want to touch on, but let me point out a few things that stood out to me that I think might be helpful to folks. The first is right at the beginning, coming back to a lesson you shared at the beginning, which is build for specific people. So initially it was build for yourself, build for your girlfriend, build for the Scouts program. And then it was build for these like 3 friends, just building it, sitting with them, building the things they need to use it, which is really interesting because a lot of times the advice you get is look for pull, look for people with problems to solve. Like you almost went the opposite. Like you're like, use my product. I need you as a favor. Use my product and help me make it better.
Absolutely. Also, like, I don't know though. I think maybe paradigms are changing, but there's some things that I don't believe in. Is like MVPs first and foremost. Is like if you're building something that people will not be able to use or is not good enough, especially these days where it's so much easier to build software, so the attention span for people to actually try out new software products is getting shorter and shorter. So yeah, pick a bunch of people that, I don't know, owe you something or have any reason to use your product when it's bad. Build for them, be there physically. I remember that even when we passed 20K users, 50K users, and 100K users, it was still very tough to get the right feedback. So I would bring like 20, 30 people to like a room together. It's like almost like a focus group or a small hackathon. I'll do that every other week just to get feedback. And it was so much easier than any other thing. And it was the same thing that I tried developing when we were just like 3 users and 5 users. And so, yeah, build it for them. They can come from different backgrounds. Again, something else that I don't really empathize with or agree with is like you have to have like a certain ICP. It's not necessarily about like the profile of a person, more of like what they're trying to do is like way more important. So you can have different types of people, but they're all trying to do the same thing, right? They're trying to build a tool.
I think some of this people should remember the tool you're building is a specific kind of tool that helps you build things. And so these lessons don't necessarily apply. In a lot of cases, you want to be really specific with ICP because there's like one thing you accomplish with this thing versus this very horizontal product.
I agree.
But I think that's still very good to know because maybe for your product, you hear all this advice. You need a very narrow focus. You got to have a very specific role and company size and all these things. And you're like, okay, maybe not. Maybe if your tool is something that a lot of people can use for a lot of different reasons, don't worry about that too much. Okay, so step one, shared it with friends, a few friends, like force them to use it. Please use this. I'm going to watch you. Your point about being there physically, I think is really interesting. Like, don't just send it to them over email and ask them how it went. It's like sit next to them and watch them use it and then keep making it better. Then you tried this product hunt launch, another great lesson. You may fail on product hunt. That's okay. You still gain like, you don't know, it sounds like you tripled, you quadrupled your user base from 10 to 30-ish in a failed product hunt launch. You also said you've tried paid, which didn't work. You tried influencer marketing, didn't work. So basically all the paid stuff didn't work, but that's great. Great lesson. I think people generally don't want to be doing that kind of stuff. The point you made about starting to share it in public, I think is really interesting. A lot of people post stuff on LinkedIn and everyone like it's cringy. There's a lot of people building in public. Who cares? What are you building? I don't know. I don't care about what you're building. What is it you think stood out about the way you approached it? That is it this tool you built that tells you how to post really viral stuff? What do you think you did that made people care? Is it like the small community you're already part of in Israel and the tech scene? Like, is that a big part of why you think it worked? Is there anything else that might be helpful to folks that are thinking about building in public and being successful there?
So first, a disclaimer, I feel like I had some very small, not audience, but like I had plenty of like LinkedIn connections before. And so everything started from LinkedIn, right?
It's LinkedIn, okay, great.
Yeah, so now that the acquisition story is getting crazy all over the world. So getting a lot of followers from a bunch of like different social media platforms. But it started with LinkedIn. I think the fact that I was like the CEO of this company, previously like had some people around me in my connections. So again, you have to have like, if you're writing to like something that I told a friend a few weeks ago, building public is great, right? But other channels can really work, but at some point you have to like take a bet on one channel that you see it's working. So like if you're writing posts week over week and like you get 5 likes, it's likely not going to change drastically. So, and again, I tried a bunch of things. Influencer didn't work. Okay, I'll just put it aside for a second. Let's see if I can find a channel that works. And so, yeah, for the building public, I was trying to be as honest as I could and just write the good, the bad. And I think also the fact that like I wasn't a venture, like I wasn't a VC funded company. I didn't try looking the best or show, hey, look at my amazing metrics. So like make everything looks like really pink and really great. And I'm the fastest growing, whatever, bootstrapped company in the world. I think just writing really about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and just being very realistic and sharing the learnings along the way. Again, this is specifically for my audience, right? So my audience were builders, and so I'm not sure that it works to any other product category. but yeah, just being very realistic and doing posts from the deepest like technical tech stack and how I optimize the LLMs to just sharing some feelings or growth. People like to see numbers, people like to see charts. And also even there, even in the building public, like I would ask my friends beforehand that I knew that they were the target, like, what do you think of this post? Is it interesting? Is it not? Like, do you see value out of that? And it's like almost like a product that you're releasing out there. It's the same thing.
Okay, this is really interesting. So being honest, really effective. Feels like there's like this underdog element of being a solo founder, not VC funded, adds to it. Also, just sharing really interesting learnings, things you've learned yourself that I'm innately people find interesting because you didn't know this stuff, and
Yeah.
also just like fun stats and charts and things like that. Building a tool on Base44 that can help you make these tweets better. Also, I think it's important to note you had a network ahead of this. Like you had people, you had followers, you had connections. It wasn't like starting from zero. What's like a rough sense of just like, I don't know how large your network was. What's like a way to think about that so folks are like, oh wow, I'm nowhere near that.
I don't think it was very big. I think it was like maybe a few thousand connections. Nowadays it's a few tens of thousands, but like you start seeing some engagement, and once you do that, especially when you like you're saying, okay, this is the channel that I'm going to put all my weight on.
Okay, that's a really important point too. It wasn't like cross post to Twitter and Instagram, all these things. It's pick one and just nail that.
Yeah, till this day, I think that like posting on Twitter was a waste of time. I at some point like okay, I saw LinkedIn succeed, and I was like, okay, let's do the same thing on Twitter. Now I have like a better following on Twitter, but yeah, like it didn't really work. So I was spending a lot of time where like from LinkedIn I saw like the highest ROI, and it could be very different for different founders for different products. It could be Reddit. It could be like opening up a Substack. Like it could be very different things. For me, that's what worked. And like once you see something work, just double, triple down on that. Keep on. Like don't try to spray and pray. It doesn't work at this stage, at least for me, not.
That is really great advice. It aligns with what I often see with traditional growth engines. There's like SEO, there's paid, there's sales, there's virality, word of mouth. And usually a company grows mostly through one. And
Yeah.
LinkedIn, interestingly, was your vector of growth. Also, just this incentives piece is really interesting, a really cool tactic. So the tactic here is incentivizing people to share what they built on Base44, and they get credit to build more. I've never heard of that before. How do you actually do that? Do they send screenshots or something? How do they get credit?
They literally like early on, they sent me emails, and I would tag them again with an app and an LLM. Like there's support is a whole different topic that we can speak about for hours. Like how do you run support when you're solo, which is a huge topic. But like they would send, I would say, hey, write a post, paste the link back, send me an email with like the link, and I'll give you credits. And so at some point I automated that because I couldn't really manage like the whole thing. But yeah, because you couldn't really like connect it like the social APIs and so on. It was hard. So I was like, just send me the post.
I know exactly what you mean with the support challenges of being a solo person with the newsletter of a million people. I get endless little things just come up. I am really curious to hear you solve it. Let's not get into it. In terms of being solo, actually, I haven't asked this yet. How long were you actually solo? When did you actually hire your first, second person into the journey of the 6 months?
So the first person started 2 months ago, so a month and a half before the acquisition. So I was running mostly solo. I think, but like when he started, I already knew that it's headed there.
To an acquisition.
Yeah, and also at some point, like once I saw that the chances of this happening are grow. So yeah, I hired like the best people I know because I knew that like I have now these few years, if not more, that like I want to build an awesome, like I have to build this to be really big, and I need the right people around me. And it's not anymore about like let's try and be as profitable and as fun as possible. It's like let's literally take a bigger bet. And that's where I started like bringing in people that I knew, the best people that I knew to kind of like help me build that. Also, like the way the deal is structured. Not that I can share a lot of details around this. Like, okay, there's like the 80 mil that got published. That's the initial payment, and then there's this earnout piece, which is really interesting because I think we structured the deal in a really win-win situation. Um, but then a lot of my compensation and a lot of like the upside is actually based on that, like other than the 80 mil. And so I have both the financial interest, also the personal interest in like building this to be as big as possible. So in the month before the acquisition, I had the team starting to scale, but also Base44 like became more profitable that I could afford myself to bring in more people.
The first hire, was that an engineer? What did they do?
Actually, a product person.
Whoa, like a product manager.
Yeah, well, it's someone who I've been working with a lot, and he's like a jack of all trades, so he can go into like LLM logs and look at like mistakes and fix the prompts. He can write Python scripts to analyze things that we do. He can start implementing analytics into the product. So like a very technical product person that could wear many hats. That's what you want when you were starting out. Like at some point I was like, his name is Yoav. Some point I was telling him, hey, Yoav, you take growth now. And it's like, I haven't done growth anywhere, right? No, you take growth now. Like try and let's try new challenge. Let's try those kind of things. So you want to bring in someone that at least the field style that can do many different things.
Okay, that's really interesting. Let's finish talking about growth, and let me share stuff you've shared already about what worked. And then there's a few more things I read that you did that I'm curious how big of a deal they were. So first, you just grabbed a bunch of friends, used this product, used that to learn what to build. You tried Product Hunt, sort of effective. Early stages, it was ended up being really effective. Then you had another launch that was like you said broke the Product Hunt algorithm. How many users did that drive? Was that like a huge inflection, that second Product Hunt launch?
The thing is, like, things happen so fast that I didn't really implement any like data and like stuff like that. So I don't really know how many users it brought, but I remember first like the community around Base44 again is like one of the most incredible communities that I've seen. It's a very strong one, and like the whole like the writing. So that they all were very excited about the Product Hunt launch, and I was like, let's skyrocket Base44. And then I wake up and I see the weirdest things, like Base44 is not even in the top 10. And I was like, I know for a fact there's like 1,000 people already voted by the time it was noon. And noon in Israel, right? Very early on. It's like, I see people, right? I see more posts on LinkedIn saying people should vote to Base44 than I actually see upvotes. And so till this day, I don't really know what happened. So one of the community reached out to the support team for Product Hunt and saying, you guys should like check out your algorithm because something is not right. Like just even look at LinkedIn, like search for Base44 Product Hunt, like you'll see these many posts. And they're like, you know what, you're right, we fixed it. And then we jumped to like the first place. We were like 500 upvotes. The delta was 500 upvotes from the second place.
Oh my God. I've never seen that.
Yeah. So it was fun also seeing kind of like the community rally for this.
Speaking of community, was that all in WhatsApp? Where'd you manage this community?
WhatsApp is a surprisingly really good tool to get feedback from the community. Obviously, like it's not a great tool for the community is going so fast, so it blew past like 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000. I don't remember what's the limit on WhatsApp, but till this day, like the WhatsApp community, which was like very early on, is such a great place to get feedback. It's also, even oddly enough, it was when it first started out, it was my best place to find out if the product is up, if there's like slowness, if there's like bugs, because people write like really fast and I can see that. But obviously at some point we turned to like more scalable solutions like Discord, Reddit, those things, and then just keep on sending product updates via email.
Okay. There's another couple levers I've read about, and then I'm going to move on to a different topic. One is this hackathon you mentioned that helped you grow and become more aware. The other is you did a bunch of partnerships, which is really rare for a company of your size. So just talk about those and what that did to the business.
At one point, one of the things I really liked about building Base44 is that I saw people building apps that were really like incredibly positive and like doing really good in the world. And so, and it's I think something really interesting right now in vibe coding in general is like once you actually scale software, you can also scale the impact the software does. So you can have like nonprofits build themselves tools. You can have people that build apps for education and neglected domains that didn't really have budget because there was like no business ROI there. And once you open this up and make it super cheap to create software, then it's becoming. And so I wanted, and this was like early on, like we were at the 5,000 ish, 10,000 ish users. And so I said, okay, well, you know what? Let's do a hackathon where we open up for everybody to build like apps that do good in the world. If ever, I had no budget back then. So I was like, okay, this is going to be a 5K hackathon. Like the price is going to be 5K.
And it was your own money you were going to give away.
Yeah, it was like the profits that something that Base44 did at the same at that time. And then a lot of people started registering and a lot of teams. It ended up being 3,000 teams. So like really big. I think like I think it's the largest for good hackathon so far. And then started getting sponsor requests because it went all over social. And all of a sudden I found myself with a very like nice, back then like smaller business partnering up with Amazon, with Google, with MongoDB, with Deloitte, like with really great companies that one after another stood behind this hackathon, which was so fun. Like those are awesome teams. Like the ones that we partner up with, they opened up their offices across the globe to have like teams be there, and the prizes went obviously very high. I think this will likely be one of the top moments in my career. It was very, very empowering. But like people built a lot of like interesting things. I remember this person building a tool for her grandma who's in Alzheimer. Like she has Alzheimer's, and like building an app which is essentially a game to help the grandmother to memorize family members with like photos and names and like so many interesting and great and impactful applications.
I love that there's benefits to the hackathon route, which other vibe coding tools are taking. Not just growth, but also just good feelings and just building community and seeing what people are doing, like meeting people excited about what you're building. So many side benefits. Okay, before we move on from growth, is there anything else that's worth mentioning that worked really well, or just like that people think will work and just didn't work for you that you didn't already mention?
The last piece, but people talk about that a lot, is that velocity eventually is a growth engine. So like part of like building in public is you want to put content out there that people really like to see. And so we joked about it, but it's really true. Like people like to see charts and they like to see numbers, and it gets them attached to like this project if they're saying, oh, I wonder what's going to be profit next week, or I wonder like how much money is it losing and how can you optimize, and like that they get attached to that. And I think also velocity is to some degree the same thing, because if your product evolves really fast and you're putting features out there like every other day, people get attached to that, and people like it's. I remember people commenting on my post saying, you know what, like it's moving so fast, I have to try it now. And so this is part of it. It's like velocity solves for so many things. Like most of my thoughts when and still are when running Base44 is like, how do we increase velocity? How do we increase velocity? It's going to solve every product problem we have, or most of them. It's going to solve some of your marketing challenges if you're smart about it, and you're putting the content out there, and you're making everything like a mini launch. So I feel like that was also a great growth tool.
That is a really good point. Clearly, everyone in the space understands this as well. I want to talk about the acquisition piece, but a couple quick questions that have been on my mind. One is just, what is the tech stack that you built on? Because I think a lot of founders are like, what the hell do I build on? What will help me move fast? So get as geeky as you want, just like what are the tools and infrastructure used to build Base44?
Render.com. Oh my God. This is, honestly, they're not paying me anything. I wish I would have invested or anything. I don't think I ever spoke to someone senior there. Holy, like this was so much fun to work with, and still is. Like I remember in my previous company, we had like large teams of DevOps building processes for us to push to production. So render.com is like, how does it call like this? It's a cloud. I was like, yeah, it's like a very like built on top of AWS. You have a bunch of easy to manage processes, and easy to like start up web apps and scale them and so on.
And it's just render. It's not like a fancy version of render. It's the word render.com.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I just looked it up. Okay, cool.
yeah. So this is like everything that has to do with infrastructure. I manage both the website, the platform, and the applications itself, because Base44 is like a complex ecosystem. You have the user applications that have to be isolated and separated from the platform, that has to be isolated and separated from the websites, like a whole thing. MongoDB is really good when you're vibe coding, especially when you're building a vibe coding platform, because schemas change a lot, and it's not necessarily like LLMs don't always understand what the user is trying to send, so they keep changing the data schema. And I feel like this has been a right choice. Obviously Kelser, but again, I was spending 20-30% of my time just optimizing for making the whole repository LLM suitable. So by the way, those are concepts that I also implemented in Base44. But one thing that I kept doing is I tried making the LLM write as least code as possible. Like when you're trying to implement a feature, that try to get to a place where it can implement the feature entirely without you writing code, but the LLM would write as least code as possible. Because then when the LLM when the AI tries to like implement the entire feature from scratch, there are more places where it can make mistakes or get confused. There are more things that it needs to save in the context when you ask it for a follow-up prompt or something like that. And so I built a very high level, very opinionated infrastructure, like code infrastructure, right? It takes care of like the entire thing. When you build a new feature, it takes care of like the entire, like the CRUD, the authentication, the database, like everything that has to do with that, so that when you ask the LLM to implement a new thing, it writes very little code. And by the way, this is also true for Base44, is like provide the LLM with a really good infrastructure and SDK, and have the LLM, like the LLM still has the flexibility to write the entire feature because it's code, but make it so that that it doesn't need to spit out too many tokens. And obviously everything that has to do with rule set. There's one controversial take for me working with LLMs is don't use TypeScript. Use plain JavaScript, use JSX. It's easier for models to write code this way. So the front end for Base44 for the platform, is built in JSX, not TypeScript. And I feel like this has been working well. Part of the reason why I haven't written a single line of HTML or JavaScript in the past, like just it does this really well. And another thing that works really well working with AI is try to push as much as possible in the same repository. Instead of like separating the front end and the back end, it's easier to give like the context to the AI of like both what's in the back end, what's in the front end. Besides that, so my stack is like the back end is in Python. I feel like people can be very judgmental about that. In terms of performance, I haven't gotten into performance issues, and there's like a lot of traffic to Base44, and every now and then people try to DDoS Base44 and still the server holds. And so I feel like if you're building it the right way, Python is just a very great language to do that. Another maybe interesting take is because many of the new apps and products are being built to some degree around LLMs. So one of the things that I use is for the LLM that actually writes code in Base44, I use a mix of different models for different tasks. So Claude 4, for example, does a really nice job with first the initial prompt, like writing the app from scratch. Then everything that has to do with UI is just fantastic, like design is great. But then, for example, Gemini is really good when you get to a very complex or like very complex problem, or you need to figure out an algorithm, or Claude 4 got stuck in some bug loop, which happens a lot when you vibe code. And so I have this pipeline that tries to figure out the user prompt and then route it to the right LLM, which I feel like has been working pretty well.
Wow, that was extremely interesting. In this routing, is this what you do within Cursor, or you do this within Base44 based on what the person's working on?
Base44, yeah.
Oh,
I
wow,
don't think
okay.
Cursor has this. I wish I think there's like maybe an auto option for like, but in Base44 is like when users
Wow,
ask,
that's awesome.
I first try to analyze what they're asking and then figure out what's the right LLM to use.
That is so cool. So it's just Claude and Gemini. Those are the two they use for Base44.
Yeah, well, all of those tools, Base44, Cursor, all the vibe coding tools, I use the same paradigm, or I don't know if you call it, or method, which is like you have the heavy guns, which is usually either Claude 4 or Gemini. And then Claude 4 and Gemini usually create a high level solution, or high level kind of like what changes do you want to make to the file. So not writing all of the file from scratch every time. Cursor does that, Base44, like, and so writing like only the chunk of code that needs to be implemented in high level. And then you get like smaller, faster models like Flash or 4 Mini from OpenAI to implement, to kind of like to patch the code inside the file.
Okay. One very tactical question in a completely different direction, product question. Activation, getting people to an aha moment, feels like something that is core to retention, something that comes up a lot on this podcast. Is there anything you learned about getting that right? Anything you did that was really successful in getting people to see the value of Base44 really quickly, and in that start sharing it, using it?
Here's one interesting thing that I learned that I think was counterintuitive to me, because you always want to build the best product out there for your users, but sometimes it contradicts the aha moment, or how fast can you get users to do that. So first, when a few months ago, or more than that, when Base44 started, before actually implementing your app, so you'd say something like, hey, create a task management app. And before implementing that, because a lot of times you get this not super clear request from the user, I'd show the user like the LLM would first, before even writing code, it would first generate user flows, like almost like a PRD, or like, but something that's more digestible to folks who have like are not coming from the space. So it will generate user flows. It will show it to you like, hey, you want to create a task, and then you could say, yeah, so maybe I want to add some files and stuff like that. So it will show you what it's going to generate to make sure that it understands you, and then you click OK, and then it will generate the app. This was actually something I ditched because too many users, even though it was good for them and it was the right product decision to do that, because you'll create like better apps doing it this way, but the conversions to like get to the aha moment were not super high, and also like not super, like I think one of the key to the aha moment in the vibe coding world, or at least in Base44, is like, holy shit, like it actually understood me, and you see the app. And if you have like a stage in the middle, it makes the surprise like slightly less surprising. And so I think I ditched that, and that was a nice lesson that I don't know actually how to define the right way, but it's like, get your users as fast as possible to their aha moment. Sometimes there's a price to that. Make sure it's not too big, but sometimes there's a price to that, because at least when you're building B2C, and it's all new to me because I'm not coming from the space, but at least when you're building B2C, like the attention span is so low, really. So you want to get there in like a minute or 2 or 3. And then from there, okay, later on, ramp up the features that you wanna actually put there, so that it can be like the right product for your users.
That was an awesome insight. Thank you for sharing that. That's actually something that I think will help a lot of people. Okay, final topic. I want to talk about the acquisition process. Founders often look at this as like the dream. Oh my God, I sold my company millions of dollars, but I know it's always stressful and hectic and wild, and the work only begins. You're not like, I'm off. You have to keep building this thing. So first of all, just had the acquisition conversation start.
Wix reached out. I think back then there's like a lot of folks from the community were posting saying, hey, Wix should definitely buy Base44 before it gets too big, or something like that. Even though like we're not playing or competing in the same category, but it was clear it's going to
Why
be.
were they recommending Wix? What was just the connection there?
First, because of the Israeli the Israeli ecosystem,
Got it.
but also folks were building websites with Base44, and so it's kind of like the same
Got it.
thing.
Okay.
And obviously,
Makes
Wix
sense.
is obviously Wix is an incredible product for building websites, but a different approach from LLMs. It's now definitely getting there. And so I got there. The management team, like Wix's management team, is so friendly, and such great guys. And I remember sitting there, and I think the first sentence that was the first thing that Avishai, the CEO, told me is like, "Hey, everybody's been saying that we should buy you. Maybe at least it's worth the talk, and we're here to help." And I think early on we've explored, like at least in my mind, it's like, yeah, it seems like that's a great team to work with. They're definitely in the same space. There's a lot I can benefit from partnering up together. So it wasn't clearly an acquisition, like on the acquisition path. And Avishai, the CEO, is like a very seasoned, very experienced, and helped a lot of entrepreneurs in the B2C space, and specifically in Israel to kind of go and succeed. And so I remember meeting him for a few nights of like just eating some steaks and just chatting about how to grow Base44, and just literally just getting there to get an advice. And so at some point we saw first that we have great chemistry, both with him and with the rest of the team, which I think is really, really crucial, especially if they're buying a solo. Like this is a very unique case, but especially if they're buying like a small team, I think it's crucial for the buyer to make sure or to feel like they're going to have really good connection and chemistry with the founders, with the key people, because eventually it's like, I remember like one of the key reasons where we were like debating together whether I should join Wix or not. Is like one of the key things that we've put on the table is, oh yeah, and it's going to be a lot of fun working together. And I think also being a person is going to be fun to work with is a key, especially if you're not like a 500 people company that someone's buying. If you're like a big company and it doesn't really matter, like you're buying the operations, you're buying the product. If you're a small company that's just starting out and getting some great momentum, you have to be a person that people would love to want to work with for the next 3 years. And so this was critical. I think the best place, and this is not easy to get to this position, but the best position to negotiate such a deal or even to get there is to be also very fine with the other path of not getting acquired. In some ways, it's weird, but it's like in dating. When you're in the first couple of dates, you don't want to show too much interest, because then it's. I think also I was in a position that I was saying, hey, if it works out, it's going to be amazing, and if not, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be either way fun. Obviously, I wanted it to work out. Yeah, and the last thing I think is I don't know if it's suitable for everyone, but I'm very happy with the structure of the deal with the earnout piece, because I feel like I still show up every day to work, and it's been only 2 weeks, but I feel like it's going to be like that for years. And like I have a personal investment in the business and its success. So it's really, I feel like it's better than just selling the business and just spending the next few years and wanting to disappear.
I love that part of the deal. You could be a billionaire if it does well enough. I don't know the deals, but in theory. Let me ask. So I know a part of the story also is that when you were signing the deal, the war with Iran basically broke out. Tell that story.
So I was trying to not. I wasn't nervous throughout the process, but this is like a huge deal for me, right? It's going to change my life. Probably will change my kid's life. And when we kicked off the process, we wanted it to be fast. Also, it's not like Base44 was like a very old company with like a lot of baggage. It's like there's no legal, it was very easy. The due diligence process was very fast. And I remember us saying to the lawyers and to our great kind of like two firms that we work with, it's like until Thursday night, that's it. We're signing Thursday night. No matter what we do, let's do it. Like, let's wrap it up and make sure that we're aligning to sign Thursday night. And we get to Thursday night. It's 2 a.m. We stopped fighting over like small details. And the lawyers have agreed to everything. And I was like, okay, just send it out for signatures. We said Thursday night. And then lawyers were saying, yeah, we agreed on everything, but we still need to kind of like change the wording and so on. And we're very tired. Like, we're not going to do it the right way. Let's wake up tomorrow morning and do that. And I remember I remember going to sleep, and then 4 a.m. waking up, just like this announcement, like, hey, a war broke out between Iran and Israel. And I was like, again, this is so classic. I'm sure that the deal will, like, I wasn't sure. I was like, holy, I can't believe this is happening. It's such an insane turn of events, but everything went fine from there. We woke up the next morning and signed the papers. Yeah, it was, as I said before, it was definitely the least boring month that I had in my life.
I was just thinking back to exactly that phrase that you shared. Oh man, there's just so many parts of the story that are so interesting. It's a hero's journey story in so many ways. Mayor, is there anything else that you want to leave listeners with? Anything that we didn't touch on? Maybe just last piece of a nugget of advice for founders that are trying to be start on this journey or on this journey that you think might be helpful to them.
So first, before getting to the negative advice, if there's like the only thing that I would say, really, if there's anyone from the Base44's community that's actually listening to this, I am so grateful. Like, this community has been so supportive. And many times I'm saying, okay, maybe I did this right and that right, but I don't, it's hard for me to think about what I did. So many things right to get like this community behind the product. And so I'm so grateful for the community. So if everyone's listening, really, I'm hoping to serve everyone better. What not to do? Yeah, there's plenty. Don't just make sure that at least 50% of your time you work on the parts of you that you really like and that you're really good at. You know, there's like this plenty of ways of saying that, and different diagrams that they show you is like what you're good at, what you want to do, what's fun for you, what's energizing, what's not. I think 50% of it should be in like this sweet spot of you're doing the thing that you're genius at, like your genius zone or whatever they call it. And also fun, because that's what keeps you up, like showing up every day. And it's unbelievably different than being a very talented person and a very skilled person, but doing things that you either don't like or, and it's fine. Like, everybody does things that they don't like. And in every job, there's like those places, but keep yourself in the zone of genius. I think that's really crucial. And I feel like in the last few months, I've also met plenty of like really great and friendly CEOs, even from the Israeli ecosystem, like for public companies, right? Wix and Minded.com and eToro and so on. And they're all like, obviously they have to do a lot of different things. And being CEOs of public companies, like you have to like manage a lot of things, a lot of logistics and I don't know, bureaucracy, but they all have not tactic, like major or to some degree major part of their job is doing something that they really like and they're really good at. It's like whether it's like product design, whether it's like building a marketing machine or something like that. And I think that's critical. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. And also it's like, and you probably hear this nowadays on every podcast, but it's the best time to build. And it can be really life-changing just starting out something that you really like. Well, I feel like we're at the age, at the start of an age is going to be bigger than the revolution that the internet did. Obviously, I think now it's becoming clearer to anyone. And so just building what you want is becoming so much easier. Just do it, do something that you like. I think it's going to be, for a lot of chances, it's going to be life-changing. And if not, at least you'll have very little regret in the future.
Mayor, I'm going to skip the lightning round, but I'm going to give you, because it's approaching midnight your time, I want to make sure you get some sleep. I'm going to ask you one question. There's something I meant to ask earlier, but I didn't. Base44, what is that about? Why did you call it Base44?
This is the most really the stupidest probably reason that you hear for a name behind a product. So again, Base44 was not intended to be like a very large scale, like the global phenomena that it's becoming right now. I wanted to have base in the name because I felt like that's going to be the base of where people is going to start build software or solve their pains and so on. And obviously back then base.com wasn't available and I didn't have money to buy like a very fancy domain. So I started seeing I think it was Cloudflare. I don't remember even what domain provider was that started showing me some numbers. My date of birth is February 2nd. And so Base22 wasn't available and I say, okay, let's double it. And then Base44 is I like the sound of it. It's almost like Base64. And for the nerd in me, it was okay, Base64 is one way to encode data from one type to another. And it's Base44 is going to do the same. It's encode natural language into software. And I was okay, clicks, let's go with it. It's good that it's memorable, the number in the name, but there's no real very sophisticated reason behind it.
That is an amazing story. I love it. I love that you Base64 was cool, but I guess there's a reason 44 could be cool. And it's not even Base42. There's all these numbers around there that people know. And it's no, 44. Double my birthday, sort of like 64. That's amazing. It worked. I guess, I don't know. Maybe it shows you the power of how a name doesn't necessarily make a huge deal. Interestingly, a recent podcast episode was about how a name can make a big deal. So there's both sides to it. Mayor, this was incredible. Thank you so much for doing this. Congratulations on the outcome. I know this is just the beginning. I know the product is only going to get better. What a fun place to be. Hope you get some sleep. 2 final questions. Where can folks check out what you're building? Is it just base44.com? Anything else they should know? And how can listeners be useful to you?
Just try it out. I think we're at a place where people really love the product. And for every user that we get, it turns out to be 2 or 4 later on because they're sharing it. So just try it out, base44.com, and build something that you like. And if you have a bit more time, just leave feedback so that we can make it better.
Amazing. Mayor, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Lenny.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find all past episodes or learn more about the show at lennyspodcast.com. See you in the next episode. People just don't realize the wild journey that you have been on over the past 18 years building this company. It feels like there's almost been these 3 eras of Dropbox. The first era of you're killing it.
For the first several years, it was doubling, 10xing every year, taping user counts that we printed out to the wall and then running out of space on the wall, having to put 100,000 users, 200,000, 500K, a million, 10 million on the ceiling.
And there's the second era, which is, I'll just say, everyone's trying to kill you.
We started getting all the incumbents, Apple, Microsoft, Google, all of them launched competing products. But weirdly, it was sort of like, you see the videos where there's the mushroom cloud in the distance. You see it, but you don't hear or notice it. But it was also clear that winter was coming.
It feels like the year 2015 was a pivotal year where things started to shift.
I'd start to hear kind of a louder set of critics inside and outside the company. Less than a year later, Google Photos launches. And not only does it provide a lot of the same value, but they also gave you free unlimited storage for life. And so they just totally nuked our business model.
You end up fighting wars on 3 or 4 fronts against the big kahunas that have infinite cash and can do whatever they want.
So it killed Carousel, killed Mailbox, went all in on productivity. And I wish I could say then everything got better. It was the opposite. Actually, the narrative completely flipped on the company. Suddenly, your employees don't want to wear your t-shirt anymore. Everybody's looking to you, is wondering how the hell did you get us in this situation?
Today, my guest is Drew Houston. This may be the most interesting and most useful episode of my podcast so far, especially if you're a founder or if you someday want to be a founder. Drew shares the very real talk story of what it's been like to build Dropbox over the past 18 years, including the ups and especially the downs. He shares stories that he's never shared before, the struggles he's been through that very few people know about, what it's like to compete with big tech, how he's thinking about the future of the company, and also what he's learned about himself throughout the journey. This is a very special episode that I suspect founders will be studying for years to come. A big thank you to Drew for sharing these stories and lessons with us. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it in your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. It's the best way to avoid missing future episodes, and it helps the podcast tremendously. With that, I bring you Drew Houston. This episode is brought to you by Paragon, the integration infrastructure for B2B SaaS companies. Is AI on your 2025 product roadmap? Whether you need to enable RAG with your users' external data, like Google Drive files, Gong transcripts, or Jira tickets, or build AI agents that can automate work across your users' other tools, integrations are the foundation. But building all these integrations in-house will cost you years of engineering, time you don't have given the fast pace of AI. That's where Paragon's all-in-one integration platform comes in. Build scalable workflows to ingest all of your users' external data into your RAG pipelines and leverage ActionKit, their latest product, to instantly give your AI agents access to over 100 integrations and thousands of third-party actions with a single API call. Leading AI companies like AI21, U.com, 11x, and Copy.ai are already shipping new integrations 7 times faster with Paragon, keeping their engineers focused on core product development. Ready to accelerate your AI roadmap this year? Visit useparagon.com/Lenny to get a free MVP of your next product integration. This episode is brought to you by Explo, a game changer for customer-facing analytics and data reporting. Are your users craving more dashboards, reports, and analytics within your product? Are you tired of trying to build it yourself? As a product leader, you probably have these requests in your roadmap, but the struggle to prioritize them is real. Building analytics from scratch can be time-consuming, expensive, and a really challenging process. Enter Explo. Explo is a fully white-labeled, embedded analytics solution designed entirely with your user in mind. Getting started is easy. Explo connects to any relational database or warehouse, and with its low-code functionality, you can build and style dashboards in minutes. Once you're ready, simply embed the dashboard or report into your application with a tiny code snippet. The best part? Your end users can use Explo's AI features for their own report and dashboard generation, eliminating customer data requests for your support team. Build and embed a fully white-labeled analytics experience in days. Try it for free at explo.co/Lenny. That's explo.co/Lenny. Drew, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Lenny. It's great to be here.
I have been so looking forward to this conversation for so many reasons. One is I feel like people just don't realize the wild journey that you have been on over the past 18 years building this company. You told me a few of these stories when we had dinner recently, and I was just like, you need to come on the podcast and tell this stuff because I think it'll be really useful to a lot of people. And then also, I feel like you're just like a very real talk sort of founder that isn't afraid to share what's really going on. I think a lot of founders don't actually tell you the things they're going through. It's always like, we're killing it all the time. So for all those reasons, I'm really excited to have this chat and this opportunity to sit down with you and hear these stories. So thank you again for doing this.
Me too. And I've been a big fan of the podcast.
Oh,
I learned a lot.
Oh, wow. I appreciate that. The way I'm thinking we structure this conversation is, as an outsider, it feels like there's almost been these 3 eras of Dropbox, and tell me if I'm missing something, but essentially feels like there's like the first era of you're killing it, just up and to the right, killing it, Dropbox is on fire. And then there's the second era that I think fewer people know about, which is, I'll just say, everyone's trying to kill you. All the incumbents are coming after you. I like that. It leads to a sigh. This is going to be good.
Yeah.
And then there's the current era. I'll say the third era of just rethinking what Dropbox could be. Does that sound roughly right as a good way to think?
I think that's right. Yep.
Okay, awesome. So let's start with this first era and spend some time here, which is, I think, the era most people know you for. There's like the big Hacker News launch, the demo video of the thumb drive you're always losing, the referral program everyone's always studying. Like, you're almost the epitome of viral growth. And so let's just talk about just things here that maybe people don't know about, maybe some moments that are really important to you, memories that stand out to you. So maybe just start wherever you want to start about this time of the history of Dropbox.
I mean, I started Dropbox because out of just personal frustration, and it really felt like something that only I was super interested in as far as like file syncing and just really and focusing on one customer, which is myself. And then, the story of me forgetting my thumb drive on a trip to New York and things like that, and coding, I won't get into all that. But then I had a lot of friends who were in Y Combinator, and many friends who had like moved from Boston, where I was living, out to California and doing that whole pilgrimage, or kind of maybe one-way pilgrimage, and feeling a little bit left out, but then also having this idea for Dropbox. And then I think some of the most memorable things were the moments where Dropbox really felt like it was taking on a life of its own, or maybe it like belonged to the internet and not so much to me anymore. So for example, we had a lot of success with these demo videos. First was just getting into Y Combinator. I sort of worked backwards from thinking about, what does Paul Graham do all day? And my hypothesis was that he just like hits refresh on Hacker News like everyone else, like me, like everyone else.
This was you trying to figure out how to get
In
Paul Graham's
2007.
attention.
Yeah.
I love that. What does Paul Graham do all day? Okay.
Yeah. Well, because my first company was doing online SAT prep, and I was like 21 when I started that. But in the world, there's a lot that Y Combinator has in common with college admissions. You have like 1 million people applying for very few spots, and the more you can get some kind of hook or find some kind of side door, that was the thinking. And I was like, all right, well, if I can create some kind of like viral video, put it on Hacker News, get Paul's attention, that'd be one way to do it. And that was an idea I'd read that was inspired by a book called Guerrilla Marketing that I'd read, which is basically how to do marketing if you have no money, which was a good fit for where we were. I say we, it was just me at the time. And sure enough, like I made this video that was basically a pretty straightforward screencast of Dropbox showing it working on my computer. And then it hit the top of Hacker News for 2 days, which I don't think it can really happen anymore. But sure enough, I got a note from Paul saying, hey, this is interesting, but you need a co-founder, which was a problem because it's sort of like, because it's clear that the YC application deadline for the next cycle was maybe a week or two away. So Paul was basically sending me a helpful note that, I know you're not dating anyone, but you need to be married in the next 2 weeks if you want to get into YC. So I ended up finding my co-founder, Arash, and, there's just story after story like that in the early days. So I say the first chapter was, characterized by, just feels like one moment I'm sort of paddling in the ocean alone on a little board. The next, I'm just like 100 feet off the ground on this tidal wave, trying to stay on.
How long does this period last of just like Hacker News to something starts to change? How long is this kind of up into the right period?
It was the first several years. So I started the company back in 2007. I just, I'd been 24 at the time, moved to California. And so I'd say it was the first probably 7 years from 2007 to 2014 were really that kind of crazy fever dream, .com experience where it's a blur. I mean, basically get into Y Combinator, then it's like, okay, after we finish Y Combinator, that culminates in demo day and getting your first investors. And so we got, a person at demo day was this guy named Pejman Nozad, who's a angel investor who also owned a rug store in Palo Alto.
Oh,
so
and he runs
invited
Pear.
us there.
Pear
yeah,
VC
and he runs
now,
Pear
yeah.
now.
Mm-hmm.
He introduced us to Sequoia. He came with us to the pitch, which is I learned later was unusual. And that was on a Friday, and then Saturday, Mike Moritz is in our apartment. But anyway, so we raised money from Sequoia, and then we then at that, and that was a seed round in 2007. So right after we finished Y Combinator, and then basically you start with a pretty narrow circle of what you're working on. I mean, right in the beginning, it's just really just like coding and talking to customers. But that circle kept expanding pretty rapidly. So in 2007, we're just building the first prototype of the product. It was in closed beta for about a year. And in 2000 and 2008, we launched at what's now TechCrunch Disrupt. Our demo totally failed. The Wi-Fi wasn't working on stage, so a live demo is quite underwhelming. So that took a few years off my life, but fortunately, we had accumulated this big beta waiting list from basically doing this another version of that Hacker News video, engineered to be even more viral and kind of have all these memes and things in it. But similarly, like a few minute demo video of what's Dropbox, and here's moving stuff between a Windows PC and a Mac, and here's all these little Easter eggs about the HD DVD encryption key, or Tezande, who was one of the first YouTubers, or like Tom Cruise jumping on a couch in Scientology. All this stuff that was like this was a long time ago, 15 years ago or something, but we put this video on Dig and Reddit, and our beta waiting list went from 5,000 to 85,000 people overnight. So we got this initial seed audience by chasing that early adopter set. And then we also figured out these viral motions around our referral program and shared folders. And so Dropbox started expanding virally for the first several years. And then a lot of the engineering that we applied to the product of, Dropbox can't have a bad day when when it comes to your wedding photos and tax returns and all the things people put in Dropbox. So we took a while to get the beta right before we felt comfortable opening up to the broader public. But then we applied that same engineering mentality to these viral loops. And this was all the era when social media was exploding and Facebook platform, like all these startups were setting kind of new land speed records for like fastest to 1 million users or 10 million users and things like Zynga. And all of this was built on this emerging playbook of virality, which in turn came from epidemiology, like the study of the spread of viruses turned out to be a good parallel for the consumer internet. Draw your own conclusions. But and then we were like, oh, there's no reason this wouldn't work for Dropbox. And some of our early investors, Hadi and Ali Partovi, talked to us about how Facebook thought about growth. And then there were a lot of great people in the early days who had really fine-tuned and mastered a lot of that. And so a lot of we tried many things, conventional and unconventional, but the things around virality and the referral program really worked. And so for the first several years, it was just doubling, 10xing every year, putting taping user counts that we printed out to the wall and then running out of space on the wall, having to put 100,000 users, 200,000, 500K, 1 million, 10 million on the ceiling. So it was wild. And it was super fun, but it was also super stressful. But going from, maybe 6 million valuation in 2007 to 27 million in 2008 to then 4 billion valuation in 2011, being on magazine covers, like just that whole experience was wild.
The visual of the user numbers extending onto the ceiling is such a good one of just how quickly things grew. Okay, so let's transition to the second era. So things have been going great, keeps growing. Obviously challenges along the way, but it just feels like it's just grow. It feels like the year 2015 was a pivotal year where things started to shift. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
let's talk about that.
Yeah. Maybe the end of the first era, the start of our teenage years, would have been around 2013, 14. So, and maybe before that, 2011, 2012, we started getting all the incumbents, or all the big platform companies, Apple, Microsoft, Google, all of them launched competing products in one form or another. But weirdly, it was sort of like, you see the videos where there's like the mushroom cloud in the distance. You see it, but you don't hear or notice it. So mostly it just seemed like nothing happened when, Steve Jobs was like on stage in 2011 announcing iCloud, calling out Dropbox by name as something that will be viewed as archaic. And similarly, we always felt like we were in the shadow of the hammer of Google launching Google Drive, which had been rumored long before we even started the company. And so we were just always, for the first several years, we were sort of quivering, waiting for, the shoe to drop. And the product's launched, but you would never be able to look at our numbers and see when that happened. And the press often writes about competition like, oh, it's a shotgun blast. When later I would learn it's more of a boa constrictor. But the end of that first chapter really culminated in us recognizing that, Dropbox we experienced a lot of benefits of being this kind of product for everyone. And in fact, it would be kind of hard for me to describe in the early days who Dropbox is for or what it does, because it was similar to what's a phone for or what's a computer for. And in the beginning, that was a blessing because it meant that those viral loops would really work because pretty much everybody you would hit would have a need for something like Dropbox, either a personal need or a work need or both. But we recognized even back then, before competition, that, hey, people are using us primarily for things like backing up their devices or storage. People are using us for photo sharing. People are using us as kind of collaborative space at work, and often in huge companies. So and then we felt that there was a lot of tension between these use cases. So for example, the ideal like file server replacement for an IT admin is going to look quite different from the ideal like consumer photo sharing app. And we also recognize things like, well, we're going to be competing in many cases with the device or the operating system. When you look at something like iCloud, it's like, yeah, when you turn on your iPhone for the first time, it's probably not going to give you like an ad for Dropbox. So we're like, hey, we need to address some of these issues. So and expanded to some new areas to diversify. And so the first of that the first two things we did were, after getting enough complaints from IT administrators asking us what the hell these photo sharing features were for, we pulled all the photo sharing functionality out into a separate and new app we called Carousel, where the basic value prop was phones to that point were limited in their storage by the amount of physical storage on the device. We're like, this is silly. You should be able to have your whole life in your pocket. So be able to store everything in the cloud, but have the experience be as if everything were locally there through a lot of caching and sleight of hand and thumbnails and things like that. So there's much engineering there. And then secondly, we saw people were using us at work, and we're like, well, there's a lot of different adjacent workflows. And there was a startup called Mailbox that built like the first great mobile email client. Had a lot of funny parallels. Like they had
that's right. They're famous for that waitlist. That's a really good point.
Which was crazy. And so we're like, I don't know, maybe this is going to be our Instagram. And so we bought those guys. And then 2014, I'm on stage painting this picture of Dropbox's future. I'm like, we're going to help be the way that like you remember your life. And we have, we're going to be your productivity, the new productivity suite on your phone and all these things. But then it was this dissonance where there were so many things that were going right, and certainly the numbers, user numbers, revenue numbers, we were sort of accidentally cash flow positive, maybe a year after launching. But it was also clear that winter was coming, or that like not all things weren't exactly as they seemed, because in the start of the second chapter, 2015. I'd start to hear kind of a louder set of critics inside and outside the company. And, I'd been thinking for a long time, like, all right, man, we're really fighting wars on all these very disparate fronts, right? With storage, we're competing with the device to back up the device. With photo sharing, we're competing with Facebook, Snap, Instagram, Google, Apple. On productivity, we're competing with Microsoft and Google. And then there's a whole new cohort of companies like Slack. And then, then there's this experience of like one day I'm standing on stage talking about how all these Carousel and Mailbox and everything are the future of the company. Less than a year later, Google Photos launches. And not only does it provide a lot of the same value and look a lot of the same, in many ways, very inspired by what we had done. But they also gave you free unlimited storage for life, not just photos, but video. And so they just totally like nuked our business model in ways that were sort of bad enough in terms of just their obvious impacts, but even worse because it was so like easily anticipated. So, so it just became kind of a very public and personal embarrassment for me, because like, how could we not have predicted that or been out in front of that? And then that started this period. I'd say that was the beginning of chapter 2, where it's like that we went from the company that could do no wrong to the company that could do no right, which was a big flip. So, it's probably early summer, maybe late spring when Google Photos launched. And first I'm just thinking like, okay, this was a big miss on my part. How do we get out of this? We need to like tackle some of these competitive issues much more head on. And then what's the problem? Well, the problem is that every incumbent is going to copy your product. They're going to bundle it with their platforms, and then they're going to kill the economics. And that was clear what was going to happen with Google Photos, right? It's very similar product experience, bundled with Android, bundled with all of Google's different touch points, and then free. So that was problematic enough for carousel, but I'm like, wait, this is going to happen like with everything that we're doing. Same thing with Mailbox. I had even pitched the founders to join Dropbox by saying like, look, you're going to wake up tomorrow and Gmail and Apple Mail and everything is just going to have these swipes and snoozes, and it's just going to be the UI is not a good, or it's not a durable source of advantage. We'll buy that problem from you. And that's exactly what happened. So I'm like, all right, even in theory, how do we deal with this? And I've gotten the criticism over the years that Dropbox is a commodity, and investors in the early days would be like, hey, this is kind of a graveyard of space and kind of DOA. And I thought, well, how do other companies deal with this kind of competition and, commodities? So there's a great book by A.G. Lafley and Roger Martin called Playing to Win.
Roger's been on the podcast.
Yeah, Rogers. I'm a huge fan of Rogers. And I was like, all right, well, if we think we're selling a commodity, like try literally selling paper towels, which is what Procter & Gamble and a lot of CPG companies do. And AG was the CEO of Procter & Gamble at the time. And basically he and Roger did this download of like how they think about competition and markets and advantage. So that, and a lot of it's like thinking really critically about where do you play and how do you win? So being very selective about the markets you're in and only being in markets where you can have a leadership position, and then being really crisp about what is your leadership position. And so that was a very timely thing to read in terms of like, all right, Dropbox looks like a one product, but it's really participating in many different markets. And our big risk might be that we're the number 2 best thing in each of those markets, which would be a bad situation. Another really influential book was Only the Paranoid Survive by Andy Grove. And I'd been a big fan of Andy's. High Open Management is another great book of his, which is my introduction to management, at least the theory of management. So I just love that book. And then Only the Paranoid Survive talks about Intel's experience where they actually had something like this happen. That I wasn't aware of. And we all know Intel as like the microprocessor company, right? Intel Inside, at least in the 80s, 90s. But before they were in microprocessors, they sold memory, like RAM. And in the 70s, they were running into a situation where they had built their business, they were really high growth, successful business selling memory. But then they had these Japanese competitors that were just building memory faster, better, cheaper, just on every dimension, and potentially also things like anti-competitive things, like where the government might be subsidizing these manufacturers, and so they're this feeling like not only they might just be better at the game, but there's also not a level playing field. But meanwhile, you wouldn't see it in their numbers, like they're still growing. It's just that there are these weird dissonant experiences where salespeople just suddenly have problems selling into accounts that used to be a slam dunk, or things that used to work just stopped working. And this happens, like, it was like BlackBerry's and Nokia's best sales years happened in the years after launching the iPhone. So these things don't actually change immediately. And so Andy labeled these moments strategic inflection points for a company. And I'm like, yeah, we're definitely in a strategic inflection point. But they were dealing with like, okay, like our whole business is memory. How do we deal with this competition? And there's this little vignette where he and Gordon Moore, one of the other co-founders of Intel, said, hey, let's pretend we're consultants to ourselves. What would we do? And what they immediately decided was like, oh, well, we clearly get out of the memory business and put all of our chips on this sketchy little microprocessor thing that was much smaller, but very high growth, and potentially big market. And then they're like, well, why don't we do that? Only problem with that is that's like saying, it's like Google saying, yeah, let's get out of search, and go all in on Gmail or something, or YouTube. So it just seemed insane, but Andy cautions in the book that like, look, most of the time CEOs want options. They want to hedge their bets. But you really want to do in these strategic inflection points is, go all in on one thing, or, as Mark Twain put it, like put all your eggs in one basket and watch that basket. But what the implication of that, and I was like, all right, this makes sense to me, but man, this is gonna be painful. So I go away for 4th of July. I'm with my family in New Hampshire. I reread the book. I come back. I'm like, well, we really got to do it then. So I killed carousel, killed mailbox, went all in on productivity. To some extent, that was a relatively easy decision because most of our subscribers, 80% of people paying for Dropbox were using it at work. But that meant foreclosing on photo sharing and consumer and storage and all these things that Dropbox had become synonymous with. And to this day are some of the things that people were most recognized for. And I wish I could say like, then everything got better. As the opposite, actually, the narrative completely flipped on the company. The press started, we killed these new products, and then internally and externally, the narrative became super negative. The articles would come out every week or two, like, oh, Dropbox is gonna be the first dead decacorn. And then sometimes, we've all seen this in tech, like companies sort of get in this washing machine of sort of self-perpetuating negative press. And if it goes deep enough, Uber had this for a while later. Meta's had this over their history, lots of companies, where you just can't get the monkey off your back. And then because what the reporters end up doing is they basically, park their metaphorical van behind your office. They interview all the people that you just fired and then print everything that they say anonymously as if it were facts. I'm not playing. There's a lot of truth to what the press were saying, so I can't really blame them or say they were being unfair. But it immediately put recruiting into this deep freeze. You're just in the situation. You've started this company, it's been super successful, and then suddenly, your employees don't want to wear your t-shirt anymore. And frankly, you don't even want to wear your t-shirt anymore. It's just you completely take your pride in your own company takes a big hit. And meanwhile, I've talked mostly about the external market competitive forces, but inside the company was a mess too. Like the business's revenue had scaled so much faster than our ability to hire and sort of build the right infrastructure and operations internally. And so everybody's just kind of like panicking and being like, all right, well, good, Drew, we're not doing carousel, we're not doing the mailbox. Like, what are we doing? And, the truth was like, if I knew the answer to that, like we would be doing it, but it's just, this is going to take some time to figure out. So it's pretty tough. When everybody's looking to you as the founder and CEO, looking for quick fixes and answers, and also just wondering like, how the hell did you get us in this situation?
Wow. So we're going to talk about how you're actually turning things around and the work you're doing now, learning from this experience, but I have a lot of questions about this part of the journey.
Yeah.
Just to kind of almost summarize the journey, it's like launch, killing it, viral, find all these opportunities, find all these big markets. You kind of start 3 different product lines. There's like the enterprise use case, there's the consumer file storage use case, there's photo sharing, there's productivity. And then basically every big incumbent's like, okay, great, we're going to come eat your lunch. And you end up fighting wars on 3 or 4 fronts against the big kahunas that have infinite cash and can do whatever they want. It's interesting the way you described the Apple launch of just like it was this mushroom cloud that you didn't quite see for a while, but the Google Photos launch was like, okay, that was like more clear of like, okay, this is bad news. Is there anything, I know it's always easy in hindsight of like, oh, I should have done something different when Apple launched this thing, but is there anything maybe you could have done, or was it even possible to have adjusted course at that point? Or was it like, okay, this is tough and we need time to figure it out?
Well, we panicked about the Apple thing too, because that also that created a much smaller version of the sort of tempest in a teapot that the Google Photos did. It was just much less public. Or it was just less obvious that we would be so out of position. And actually, we were more surprised to the upside when, as Google Drive launched, as iCloud launched, as OneDrive launched, and even as they build like version 2, that we just didn't really notice that much of a problem. And, I also studied over the years, what happened in Netscape and companies like that, or, MySpace or these other cautionary tales. And interestingly, Internet Explorer was the thing that eventually like undermined Netscape enough to sort of permanently throw it into a negative trajectory. But Internet Explorer 1.0, 2.0, even maybe 3.0 just weren't that good and didn't really do anything. But Internet Explorer like 4.0, 5.0, and all the bundling, that really made a big difference. or big negative difference. And then another thing that was interesting was, there's a big time lag where between when these products launch and when they actually have an impact, because often it's not so much the existence of the product or its availability, it's the sort of constant bundling or the constant iteration, or, it's the boa constrictor. It's like in any given second, it's not much tighter, but, over the following day, you're in a bad place. And then, but another thing that was interesting was, one cool thing that we got to do in moving to California is you get to actually meet people who had been at these companies. And one of those people was a guy named Bill Campbell, who was at Netscape who during that whole period. And I'd asked him, I'm like, man, that's like really unfair. That sucks. What happened with Microsoft and bundling with Windows and all these things and the antitrust and this and that. And he's looked at me, he sort of laughed and snorted, and he's like, Microsoft did not kill us. Like, we killed ourselves. And so that was the other half of what was the problem within Dropbox was a lot of our wounds were self-inflicted, in that we were struggling to keep scaling and launching all these products, and the Dropbox product had kind of stagnated. And I started to learn the hard way that, okay, yeah, I now understand what Bill is talking about, because we are hiring all these smart people, but the things we would do as a company would seem really stupid. And then some of these things were me personally. Like, yeah, I knew about from reading all these different things, but for whatever reason, I guess we just like kept going or we were just like too confident in our ability to respond, or we sort of got lulled into this complacency where like, oh, well, because it hasn't been a problem, it won't be a problem in the future. But I'd say there's something about the Google Photos launch that just really set things off kilter. And then also for me personally, I mean, I think, go from feeling pretty good all the time, good but stressed out all the time, to mostly feeling bad all the time. And, I just remember like leaving, really trying to get away from the office for a little bit during this period, kind of like pick my teeth up off the ground. And the good news, I bought a place in Hawaii. So I was like doing that in Hawaii, but didn't feel very good in any way. And then I like learned, that I had to like really figure out a lot of different things for myself to be like the leader that could get us through this. Because mostly what I felt was like, man, I felt like we'd been doing such a good job, but now like, man, if I like really screwed this up, or like, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. And so I think maybe some of the best, and then I had to really reset on a number of fronts. Like one is, I just remember thinking like, my 18-year-old self would be like, what the hell are you complaining about? Like, you did it. Like, it's so great. And yet I felt so bad about things. And so I'm like, yeah, both of those things are true. Like, how do I navigate that? And I think one part that was really helpful was sort of getting a sense of equanimity, basically, and doing a lot around like mindfulness and meditation to sort of distance. One thing that happens when you're a founder and your company succeeds is your identity is fused with the company. And so it's easy to get in a situation where you only feel good if the company's, or however how you feel is how the company is doing. And you need to sort of separate that a little bit. So what that looked like for me is sort of recognize like, yeah, there's really not an easy button that keeps things up and to the right forever. And most of the entrepreneurs that are like my heroes had various periods of wandering in the desert. Those things, instead of just being problems, were probably the crucible that forged the people that they became. So the presence of badness is not necessarily you are bad. And it's like, yeah, no, you're just getting your stripes as an entrepreneur. And people were really helpful during that period. So I mentioned Bill Campbell. He was nice enough that we just stayed in touch, and he would take me out to dinner, every now and then. And I would be freaking out, but I was always surprised. He never seemed to be freaking out. And mostly he would just be saying like, all right, he'd sort of like dust you off and kind of smack you and say like, get your ass back out there. And he's, he was literally a coach of, the Columbia football team. But he, in addition to being a great technology executive and advisor to many of the great founders that I looked up to. But, he would just he was really helpful because he sort of helped me believe in myself, even when like I wouldn't believe in myself. And then people like Andy Grove, who had written all these books, I'm like, well, at least I'm having this problem. But yeah, that raised a question for me. I'm like, okay, I'd been through this chapter 1 where everything's up and to the right. But I sort of ran out of like merit badges or like Xbox achievements to collect. Like, I was like, we did it. We got the product to this many users. We got it to where we got this valuation, or let me back up. So my whole life, and or it's common, I think, for a lot of founders, especially, if you get good grades and stuff, you follow a pretty linear path from childhood from, first get the right test scores, then get into the right college, take the right classes, get the right internship, get the right job. And early startup life is like that a lot. It's like, okay, have an idea, find a co-founder, get into Y Combinator, get funding from Sequoia, launch an MVP in 10 million, 100 million, billion valuation. And I felt like we'd cleared all that. And so actually one of the other problems, like, I don't even know what Dropbox needs to be in the world. And I don't even know what I want to be in the world. And so part of this was also like sort of reconnecting to some kind of sense of purpose. Because if I was really honest with myself, I was like, well, I'm just like checking boxes and sort of advancing and leveling up like a video game or something. But now I'm here. I'm like, all right, what is it? Just big numbers bigger? It's also like not that fun to just launch something that you put your like soul into and then just have it get crushed by these competitors. It's even worse when you're bringing all these 100 other people who worked on that thing through that, meat grinder too. Are we just inventing things 10 minutes before Google and Apple do? If not, what are we doing? And then if we're really, really honest with ourselves, I'm like, I think it's kind of hard to argue that no one would have invented like cloud photo gallery that wasn't constrained to your local storage. So I had to like really rethink like what does the company need to do? That actually took a longer time to answer than I wanted. But then also just what do I want to do? And I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to do this. What I ended up settling on was like, look, kind of coming back to my 18-year-old self. I was like, all right, stop complaining. This is like a pretty good situation. You wanted something where the learning curve would be steep. Here it is. You get to do this really meaningful work to build things for millions of people, work with awesome people, work with awesome teammates. There's always good things about it. And you've like chosen this life. So stop complaining about the burdens. Because it's really dangerous if you start to resent the job or feel like a victim, because that's just like corrosive to everything else. And you can get in this spin cycle.
What helped you come to that place? Because that sounds like a very hard place to get to and a very important place. Was that like Bill Campbell advice? Was it a lot of, how long did it take you to go from this is not going well and that life sucks to, okay, let's look at it this way?
I think there were a couple unlocks that were pretty fast, but I think, again, this was not like, oh, then I felt better and we lived happily ever after at all. I'd say there were some moments of recognition where I was able to like, I always try to like get away from kind of the mayhem or the whirlwind and recenter myself and do think weeks and things like that. And so those were really helpful because I felt when I diagnosed like, well, when I'm on this treadmill and just like firefighting or how did I miss this important thing? It's like, well, basically the root causes of being on the treadmills, I was just like, I was like too busy firing to aim. And then like, I thought I would do my aiming on vacations and things like that. But like, no, it really needs, I need to like get off the treadmill every now and then and make the space to really address some of these bigger questions. Cause it's not like I didn't forget about them. They just were like always below the fold on my to-do list to deal with. And then until, a few years go by and you're like, wait, yeah, we really were just strategically out of position. Or the other way I sort of came to some of these conclusions, There's a combination of things. So I think picking up like a meditation and mindfulness practice, having therapists personally, having coaches, having friends and mentors, other founder friends. And so I wouldn't say it was any one thing, but I think it was a whole, you have to like build this whole ecosystem of support around yourself and recognize like no one's going to do that for you. And it's super important. And then to the other, Bill's other point is like, yeah, we're killing them, or the Microsoft wasn't killing us, we were killing ourselves. I think, having to ask some hard questions to myself of like, yeah, some of these wounds were self-inflicted. As much as there might be Microsoft, I could look at this and say, oh, Microsoft was mean, or Google was mean, or Apple was mean, but I'm like, I drove the ship towards these rocks. So like, there's no one that's one downside of being founder CEO. You don't really have you can't blame the last guy. I think every founder has to really, one of the big questions every founder has to figure out is not just like, how do I have equanimity? What's my purpose? But then also like, what am I doing that is destroying the company? And because everybody's got strengths and weaknesses, but as CEO, like, both your strengths and your weaknesses are massively amplified. And a lot of blind spots in your personality can become huge cultural dysfunctions in the company. And so step one to dealing with that is like building awareness. And one thing that kind of floated around the company for a while was the Enneagram, which, on its surface is a personality typing thing like Myers-Briggs. I often describe it as like, it's like Myers-Briggs, but actually useful. The way it works is it's a personality typing system. You get a number from 1 through 9. That's kind of your dominant personality. Or there's 9 types that are numbered. It's similar to Myers-Briggs in that, Myers-Briggs has 16 types of letters like E, N, F, J, or different things. But I find that Myers-Briggs is more descriptive. So it tells you like, okay, you're an introvert, not an extrovert, or vice versa. You're judging instead of perceiving. But I could never really work out like what that meant. And so it's descriptive versus like predictive or causal. Enneagram, I find, is the motivations, or the theory of it is really about your fundamental motivations. Like, what are you running towards and what are you running away from? And the theory goes like, through some combination of your wiring from your genetics and your early childhood, your autopilot is kind of fixed after your childhood. In that, like, you just have instinctive responses to things. Now it's autopilot. It doesn't mean it's your destiny. You can override it, but it's super important to become aware of like, what are you running from and towards? And the Enneagrams gives you a really good map to do that. So, and so I'm reading this book, and it starts by like, you type yourself, and I'm kind of rolling my eyes. I'm like, okay, I'm a 7. What's a 7? And then you read, each type has its own chapter, and you read the chapter, and I was like, oh my God, this like completely describes like who I am down to my core. And I was like, just almost like looking over my shoulder, like, who the hell did this? Like, I thought I was a special snowflake, but apparently not. Okay, I'm listening. And, and it dovetailed with a lot of my early coaching experiences, which are, you do a 360, your coach sits you down. They're like, here are your strengths. In my case, it would be things like, oh, you're really creative and you like new ideas. Like, that's okay. And second, you really love people. You build great relationships with people. I'm like, okay. Third, you're really comfortable in chaos and resilient. I was like, this coaching thing is great. So yeah, this was my first coach. And then you flip to your like development areas, because no one calls them weaknesses. It's like, all right, one is like, you're like bored by routine and really undisciplined. Second is you're really conflict avoidance. And third is, you're intuitive, but you're also like pretty chaotic and like don't create enough structure for people. So they're mostly confused. And when you sort of pair the two together, you're like, oh wait, yeah, I'm creative and like new ideas, but I'm bored by routine and, bit of a space cadet. All right. You love working, you love good relationships with people, but you don't want to make them unhappy. So you don't tell them the truth basically about things that are difficult to hear, so, and it's going to be a similar kind of map of things depending on your personality type or circumstances. But the Enneagram was that map for me to be like, okay, I've got these things that are genuinely great, but I need to like address, but these downsides of like the company's conflict avoidance. So we're like, not telling the truth and then making a bunch of predictable mistakes, or I'm creating this really chaotic environment where people don't know what they're supposed to be doing. Like that's a problem. Like my personality is like quite directly going to torpedo the company unless I do something about it. The same is true for any founder. I'm a type 7, it's the enthusiast. It's like, again, central casting is like a lot of new things and creative and love just interesting things, but then kind of a space cadet, FOMO, some of the shadow side of it. And every type has a thing like that. So really understanding, okay, then I was also just like frustrated in the day-to-day of my work. I'm like, yeah, I'm not really getting to do these like creative things, or I'm like too busy firing to aim. I'm like missing these like bigger picture things that are really taking the ship way too close to the rocks. Like, okay, then I need to then understand what those things are and either like work on myself or like hire the right people who don't have those issues, or one way or another, just like make it so the company is not so exposed to like my personal dysfunction. And so, yeah, it was a whole kind of constellation of things like that, where it's like, all right, we have to get, after this whole tailspin, like we got to work, I'm like, all right, first business issues were just like, the most urgent issues were just like blowing all this cash. We need to like get the P&L to look a lot better and get out of this land grab mode, or like fighting with like, Google on like giving more free storage away, or just being in these fundamentally unprofitable things. And so we did that. We cut the unprofitable parts of the business. We turned cash flow positive in 2016, maybe several months after this reckoning. And that set the tracks for getting to $1 billion run rate in 2017, going public in 2018. We had to come up with a new vision and mission for the company, which I'll maybe save for chapter 3. And then I was also just trying to do things that were like more to help sustain me through the difficult things. Like, I'm like, well, I'm an engineer as a little kid. I was coding since childhood. I knew I wanted to be a founder. I didn't know I wanted to be a CEO. So I sort of backed into being a CEO. So I'm like, man, there's a lot of tedious things about being an executive. So I was like, I'm finding ways to like automate tedious parts of my job and learn machine learning in 2016, 17. And that ended up being really important later on. But then also is just like coming to terms with my job and, what I wanted to do from a personal perspective, which included things like, I'm lucky in that being a CEO is, I always wanted a steep learning curve. In a lot of professions, like in sports or, math or chess or certain academic fields, like you kind of peak in your 20s or 30s. CEO is not like that. You can kind of go your whole life and still not be like a master. So I'm like, for better or worse, it's pretty cool that I can do this kind of work. And then, I don't really get that much out of just like chasing bigger numbers. I just really want to, like, the thing that is my favorite thing about Dropbox is like looking over someone's shoulder in a Starbucks and seeing if the little Dropbox icon is there, like building something that becomes a verb, like taking some of the pain out of technology, things like that. Really reorienting. Yeah, it's not about just like the like external scoreboard as much. It's more about like the craft of being a great CEO, and like building things I'm really proud of or really making a difference. And so those kinds of things, none of them all kind of coalesce. It's sort of like this lens that like slowly and stubbornly comes into focus, but making the time to have some of that reflection was super important.
So much of what you're describing makes me think about founder mode in a lot of different ways. One is your point about how you didn't have a lot of time to think about where things might be going and how the markets are shifting. And that has to happen. Basically, no one else is going to do that if it's not you. Also, just this idea of how much of the solution was you understanding yourself better, reflecting on where you have strengths and weaknesses. Also, I'll mention, so before I had Brian Chesky on the podcast, I asked you what should I ask Brian? And you asked me to ask him basically about founder mode, which was the first time I think you talked about it. And now it's like this whole thing. And so you've been in the middle of all that for a long time. I guess just any thoughts on like the importance of that and how you think about that as a founder?
So founder mode means a lot of things to a lot of people. So it's a bit of a Rorschach test. But I think like parts of it that really resonate with me are there's this evolution you go on as a founder where you sort of don't know what you're doing. And everything is new and unfamiliar. and then you're also like very involved in all the details because there's no one else to be involved in the details. Like, it's not like someone else is like coding for you if you're just like in your room at home. But then over time you have to, there's this like, Ben Horowitz calls it the product CEO paradox, where the first way that companies die is from founders not letting go. And so you need to learn to like scale yourself and like hand off your responsibilities and move and operate at a higher level of abstraction. But then the second way that companies kill themselves is the founders get too far away. And I felt like I had done that. That's a big part of the problem that led to a lot of this chaos at the end of chapter 2, where I was like, oh man, I'm on this treadmill. I'm doing stuff, but I'm clearly not setting the right direction, or people are confused, or there's, it's not working. And I was like too distant from the product. And then, there's all kinds of issues you can get into as you hire an executive team and get that to function well. And so I think there's a debate to what extent founder mode is sort of a mindset or a destination. To me, I think the destination part is pretty important. I think it's like after that learning journey, suddenly you have this conviction from actually knowing, from having lived experience and kind of navigated a lot of these things, where suddenly it's a lot clearer. You don't have the same kind of confusion or learning curve problem. And then if you start out being too far leaned in, then you like lean out too far. And I think a lot of that founder mode flip is like when you're like, hey, this is not the company I want to be running. Things need to be like that. I need to be more involved. I need to stop making excuses. Like I need, and it's like basically, I also don't want to like apologize or negotiate all the time for the kind of company that I want to be part of and run. So I had that too over time, maybe in more towards like a chapter 3, some of those elements of, and I think I don't know if there's a way to get to this destination without some level of pain, certainly like the Elons and Steve Jobs of the world had sort of big spans of like wandering in the desert, where they were not as cool as they are today. And like the things they were doing weren't working, and they managed things very differently in that sort of post wandering phase, and suddenly had this level of like conviction and intuition that they might not have had before, or they sanded down some of their more like counterproductive instincts. So again, there's a lot of surface area. I don't know if anybody has a common definition of founder mode, but certainly that evolution, that way I think about it is like, it is very difficult. Like one of the hardest things when you're running a company is that you're hiring all these execs who the only thing is like they know a lot more about their subject matter than you do. And so like, what does it even mean to manage, bring in an exec who had managed like a double-digit billion-dollar P&L at Google, and like, what am I supposed to tell him how sales works or marketing or like, but you end up, it's easy to be too leaned out there where you're like not really setting clear direction. And so, each founder is going to have their own sort of things that are easy, things that are harder. Step 1 is being aware of them, and then being intentional about how do I like offset those things. And then you eventually get to a point where the learning curve flattens out. You actually do have some experience, and you can have a lot more conviction about where what the company should do and where you want it to go.
Awesome. The way you described it to me, which has really stuck with me, is like as a founder, as you said, you're in there, leaning in, doing all on top of everything, micromanaging. Then you lean out and hire execs that you think are smarter than you and delegate more. And then it's like, oh, things aren't going great, and come right back into it.
And specifically, it's often well intended, but as you or it's often even not conscious, but as you hire these execs, and then you also build up like an HR function, you get coaches and things like that. And then there's the things are not going well. One thing that can happen is you start collecting all this feedback, and people are like, wait, if I can give Drew some negative feedback, then maybe I can displace some of the, it's sort of easy to get in a situation where you're sort of being, my to-do list of like problems and just like weaknesses and flaws I needed to work on was like super long, like way longer than anyone else's. And on the one hand, I'm like, well, yes, I'm wholly accountable and responsible for everything in the company as its CEO. So that's not wrong. But you can sort of end up just like carrying too much of the water. And so a lot of it ended up having to be kind of this like pushing back a bit and be like, all right, yes, there are things I need to work on, but that can't be an excuse for my leader, my execs to somehow evade accountability. So there's these sort of systemic things that can creep in, for sure, and then you get this feedback and you're like, now I'm doing all this behavior, or now I'm behaving in ways that I don't think are really right. Or I'm like, everything is this like negotiated compromise with everyone on the roadmap or on how we behave or strategy. And so at some point you end up like blowing that up, as a founder. And that was certainly my experience.
This episode is brought to you by Vanta. When it comes to ensuring your company has top-notch security practices, things get complicated fast. Now you can assess risk, secure the trust of your customers, and automate compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and more with a single platform, Vanta. Vanta's market-leading trust management platform helps you continuously monitor compliance alongside reporting and tracking risk. Plus, you can save hours by completing security questionnaires with Vanta AI. Join thousands of global companies that use Vanta to automate evidence collection, unify risk management, and streamline security reviews. Get $1,000 off Vanta when you go to vanta.com/Lenny. That's VANTA.com/Lenny. I think this is a great segue to get into chapter 3. Basically, what I understand from what you're going through right now is you're rebooting the team, you're rebooting the core business, you're rebooting the product. I think it might be good to start with the team. You talked a few times about just how you feel like you got to a point where the team wasn't shipping as much as you thought you would, as much as you think they should. Talk about maybe that part of it, of just the realizing, hey, this part of the business needs to change. And then we can talk about the product and the direction you've discovered.
Well, I mean, my playbook as an entrepreneur is to get like really frustrated by something and then try to solve that personally. So I'll cover the team and sort of what direction we ended up choosing.
Perfect.
Kind of together. So, my first frustration was like forgetting a thumb drive and then wanting to like never have that problem again. But my second big frustration was like, man, scaling this company is like way harder than it should have been. And thank God I had people like Bill or Andy or friends, mentors to guide me along. A lot of people don't have access to that. But I feel like I could have like written myself postcards that would have made this a little bit easier. Or there are just some things that are just like don't make sense about how you scale a company. And there seem to be things that are like really broken about the way we work in general. So as I was sort of piecing through a lot of the challenges, I'm like, all right, what should Dropbox do? Well, we should probably not do things that would have been invented by everybody else 10 minutes later. Where are the problems that are not solving themselves? And one problem I felt like was not solving itself was this problem of being just like on this treadmill where I'm like, I'm working really hard. I'm in meetings all day, emails all night. Is this it? First world problem, no complaints, but I'm like, this is so weird. Cause I'm like, yeah, I'm making like huge strategic mistakes. Cause I'm not actually, I'm too busy firing to aim. And, I'm just like sort of upset at myself about a lot of these things, but then I, look left, look right. I'm like, wait, everybody is too busy firing to aim. Like everybody is on the same treadmill. And I'm like, this is bizarre. Cause like, who's winning here? It's like, if you're just like, I was working hard and the company was benefiting, then, no problem. But like I'm working, I'm like very busy, but I'm not really like productive. I'm not putting in a lot of creative input, and then the company's not getting a lot of creative output. I'm like, it just seems like lose all around. And then I'm like, well, why are we on this treadmill? Like we know from brain science that people are like most happy and the most productive, fulfilled, engaged, kind of everything you want where we'd rattle off the same list, like when people are focused, when they're in some kind of flow state, when they've had enough sleep, when they have a sense of purpose. Right. And so we know all that. And yet we go to work and it's like this, cage fight of like who's busiest, who's gotten the least sleep, who's most inbox zero. And then you look at the environment on our screens. It's like, if you wanted to, where we now, especially after COVID, we live with that. That's where we work. We don't work in an office, even no matter what flavor of hybrid you are, you're working on a screen. And COVID kind of relocated us from offices to screens. And you look what's on that screen. It's like, yeah, if you wanted to design a working environment that made it impossible to ever focus, ever get into a flow state, bombard you with just like constant interruptions and distractions and busy work, then yeah, you can sort of squint and see like me even before COVID, but definitely after, but like that people are like, yeah, I'm really like not feeling great. I'm not feeling super engaged because half my work is bullshit. The other half, I'm just like distracted to death. And I was just like, I'm like, why is this like this? And I was like, all right, maybe Dropbox doesn't have to exist. Maybe we did the thing. Maybe I should go, maybe I'm ready for the tech bro ascendancy. Maybe I should be like flying cars, space, cancer, climate.
Ayahuasca.
Yeah, I mean, right. But then I would talk to people who were actually working on those things and they were on the same treadmill. I interviewed this director of company or a director of engineering at SpaceX. And I was like, oh my God, you're actually going to Mars. This is so cool. Like, what do you guys, how do you guys work together? What's, how are you going to get to Mars? And he's like, I don't really understand the question. And I'm like, well, what tools do you use? How do you work together? How are we going to get to Mars? And the answer was basically, we're going to get to Mars through a lot of emails and a lot of files. And I was like, oh my God, most of us, most of the time we correctly think about technology as this like force multiplier, like this amplifier of our abilities. But from another perspective, like we're only as good, as organizations as our tools, or tools can become the limiting factor. And so it's like really a problem when like the mechanism through which we're like getting work done is gone from being like a force multiplier and amplifier to like a suppressor. And like it happened, we are the frogs in the boiling water where this kind of happened one day at a time. And so all the people working on those things, and there are many others, they're all dealing with the same issues of like, I can't focus. I'm fighting with my tools. Somehow the tools went from like helping us get the work done to sort of becoming the work as we went from like 5 of them to 10 of them to 500 of them. And yeah, I'm like, all right, well, if Einstein were alive today, like what would his day be like? Like he would wake up, like he'd have to like delete a bunch of like LinkedIn notifications. He'd like get down to work and start writing equations, and then someone would Slack him and interrupt him. And, then he'd get back to work. Would we still understand relativity if Einstein were living in that kind of working environment? Probably not. And, even just like visiting my dad at work when I was a kid, like a lot of things were the same. Like he had a phone and a PC and an office, but he could turn his phone off. He got 5 emails a day, not 500. Like he would literally come home from work with a briefcase and put it down and stop thinking about work. And then when he would be in the office, like he could close the door and actually, get stuff done. Now I'm not saying we should go back to the early 90s, but I'm saying like, it wasn't always like this. And the whole frontier of productivity at the time felt like it was just like taking us in the wrong direction. Like things like Slack, which are wonderful tools, also chop up your day into little fragments and sort of make you like cognitively diabetic. There's like a lot of empty carbs in our collaboration and our collaboration tools. And I'm like, okay, here is a problem that's not solving itself. And like, actually none of our competitors even like framing the problem correctly. Like what we should be recognizing is that like our ultimate like non-renewable resource is like our time, our attention, and mostly like our brain power, our creative energy. And I think as a civilization, we're going to like, hopefully in, 5 or 10 years be like, man, we took this like crazy detour where we basically hooked up that brain power to this thing that was just like burning off half of it as friction with our tools. Like that was dumb. And yet like no company was even talking about this, let alone fixing it. So, so then we came up with a new Dropbox mission. It became, Dropbox, is designing a more enlightened way of working because the way we were working is like unenlightened, unexamined. Okay. So meanwhile, we were patient zero as the company, right? There were a lot of, no one was doing a lot of thinking. Everybody's kind of busy. Everybody's bumping into each other. And there were a lot of cultural problems, like that we were, faster your company grows and rises, the easier it is for new people in the company to think they hit a home run instead of, starting on third base. And so a lot of complacency and entitlement and preoccupations with things other than our customers or other than our products set in. And, it wasn't all bad. I think there were a lot of good things we had to pay attention to. Like we were scaling up the business financially. We were getting ready to go public. We had to mature a lot of things, but we sort of lost sight of, the place that money is coming from is from our customers, and the thing they really want is a great experience. And so there's, we've been tackling this in a lot of different ways. I mean, first is just things like after COVID hit, suddenly the world was like working in a completely different way. And we saw this as a big opportunity, not just a crisis. Or once you kind of got past the crisis part of COVID, like there was a big opportunity to maybe not, COVID kind of wrecked everything, but we didn't have to put the floorboards back down in the same places. And, I'm a big fan of people like Peter Drucker, lots of people who think about the nature of work and, this idea of we're finally decoupling work from our physical location. It's a big deal. It's probably one of the biggest changes to knowledge work in our lifetimes, or even since Drucker coined that term knowledge work in 1959. It's like, cool, we can actually work for the first time. We can actually like design how we work in ways that our parents couldn't, or the way that most of us just sort of receive how we work from our parents. But like, hey, we can actually like do things completely differently. And so we came up with this whole like virtual first model where we're like 90% remote. But then most importantly, we're trying to rebuild the new product stack for distributed work. Well, I'll talk a little bit about the new things we're doing, then I'll come back to how we're rebooting some of the core. But initially it was sort of, we studied a lot after COVID, we studied a lot of how other remote first companies had worked. We sort of synthesized, we did a lot of primary research of other companies like GitLab and Automatic and others who had been doing this for a long time. We sort of collated all that, synthesized sort of a common playbook, open sourced it. So if anybody's curious about this, you can find Dropbox. We've open sourced our virtual first toolkit. And then since COVID, so like designing a working model, very in line with our new mission, with a lot of benefits. It really works. I mean, the employee retention, satisfaction, engagement, offer accept rates, all the things we care about have been significantly up since COVID. I mean, there's many factors to that, but there's a lot that's working about the model, but really we're approaching it from a product standpoint. So in deciding to turn Dropbox into kind of this lab for distributed work, we're like, okay, when you open up your laptop in 2025, 2030, what do you see? And hopefully there's some new stuff or some things that are different on there. So like, what are those things and how do we bring them back? One of the first things you lose when you go distributed is context, right? We sort of you get a lot for free from osmosis of just go, hey, how you doing? How's this? Or, oh, do you have that thing? But then when you're remote, then a lot of that gets replaced with like endless video meetings and lots of Slack messages, which is super inefficient. And you also, one thing that was clear across the board from all the successful remote first companies was you have to be more documented. But then you have a lot more documents. And so we were like, this started turning up like very obvious problems, which is like, wait, why do I have like one search box at home and 10 search boxes at work? Why is it easier to search all of human knowledge than my company's knowledge? Why is this problem getting worse, not better every year? Because if you think about, we've got 10 search boxes that each search 10% of our stuff. I'm like, we should just like fix this. And again, even just as a frustrated user, maybe 2018, 2019, I'm like having this problem myself. I'm like, it's really hard to find stuff. Plus there's all this like cool, like vector search stuff and, deep learning stuff happening even before ChatGPT. I'm going to make like a personal search engine that takes this. So I shouldn't have to just write, if I search for strategy and the title of the document is plan, it should sort of like get it right. And the matching should be fuzzy. And then I built something like this. I'm like, oh my God, it like completely works.
And you built this yourself, you're saying?
Yeah, this was like it sort of went nowhere for a couple of years. But then after COVID and after like we're dealing with all these like information problems, I'm like, yeah, we should like be the company that helps you get the right information at the right time to the right person. And I bet that like little hacked up search engine thing that I made might be an ingredient to this. So we bought a little company called Command E that was doing universal search, and we created this new product called Dropbox Dash. And basically Dash connects to all your different apps. It gives you universal search. And then obviously after ChatGPT, not only can you do conventional search, but you can ask questions in natural language and answer a lot of the questions that ChatGPT can't because it's not connected to your stuff. So if you ask ChatGPT, like, where's my when does my lease expire? Where's that slide from last year's product launch? Can't tell you because it's not personalized, because it's not connected to your information. And so we did all of that for this whole connector platform where it connects. We index the known universe of SaaS apps, have this kind of intelligence engine that brings all of it into a common representation and lets you do conventional search, natural language search. And then more than that, like we want to organize your working life for you. And stepping back even further, often it happens that a company like starts solving a problem and that problem is never like permanently solved. So in a lot of ways, Dash is like the biggest and best embodiment of like solving the same kinds of problems I started Dropbox to begin with. Because on the one hand, I was talking about thumb drive, but I wasn't really. But if you think about the higher level job to be done, I was like, no, the real issue is that like it's super hard to find my stuff and organize my stuff and share my stuff and secure my stuff. In the beginning, that was like my stuff was my files and the scattering was across devices. Now the stuff is like tabs in my browser and cloud tools. But it's a lot of the same problems. Like, we've talked a lot about search, but then organize is still a big problem. Like the idea of there's no like desktop folder or desktop as in the physical realm when you're in your browser, right? It's just sort of this ocean of content that sort of like washes by you and then you get tired and you nuke the whole environment. But there's nothing to like come back to. There's no like collection concept, right? And files have folders, songs have playlists, links have, right? So if you're getting ready for a board meeting or remodeling a house, there's no common container. If you have like a Google Doc and a 10 gig 4K video in an Airtable, this is like a new problem. So Dash also it has this thing called Stacks and has basically smart collections that help make sharing a lot easier. But again, a lot of this was sort of an intersection of like, yeah, well, how has work changed since COVID? What crazy little science projects have I done? Then like how should one like find and organize and share their information in the cloud era? How, if I were to build Dropbox today, what would it look like? And Dash is the first part of the answer. And so we're super excited, but we just launched it like 2 months ago. And since been signing up our first customers. And so, and then I can come back to just rebooting the core business too. So I think one of the big challenges or lessons from this whole period is that, one is, as you know, part of the problem we had with the competition in the sort of chapter 2 was external, but a lot of it was internal, where we couldn't organize ourselves effectively, and the business has scaled so much faster than our ability to manage it. First is recognizing this is not like an unusual problem, and many companies, not all, but certainly many, and actually many in SaaS productivity have this sort of sophomore slump where you have this super successful first product, but then it's challenging to build like the next platinum album, right? So Dropbox has fallen into that category. You could say other, Zoom, Slack, others. So first it's just, it's just like, this is not like, it's easy to sort of feel bad about it yourself, but like, no, you're not. This is actually a very common problem. And then there's a lot of solutions. People devise lots of solutions to this. So part of it is structural. So your company has to go from a pretty fun and stable state of like a functional organization where you have engineering and product and design, and there's one product and there's one customer, and everybody's working, rowing in the same direction for the same team, to then when you have like multiple products, then you have all these conflicts. Where, how much should we invest in the core business versus the new thing? How much, who should have authority in the company? How do you try to build multiple products in a functional org, but then you lose accountability because people are like, well, I'm spinning a lot. I'm trying to make Dropbox work, and I'm trying to make Mailbox work, and I'm trying to make paper work and all these things. And so then you respond by like sort of breaking up into groups or, business units. So we have kind of a product business unit, product GM structure. Then you have to refactor things to have like a common technical platform and all the G&A functions. So there's this metamorphosis and maturation you need to go through that, is obvious, is like mega obvious to experienced people. And you're just like totally blindsided by this if you're solving it by trial and error. So it's a great book, Zone to Win, that talks about some of this, what needs to happen internally, by Jeffrey Moore. And then there's a lot of cultural problems that set in, and we sort of touched on some of them at a high level. But whether you're in a company or in an empire, a civilization, what gets you to the top turns out to be pretty similar things. You have sort of this like, outsider challenger mentality where you have to eat what you kill, and the odds are against you. And through like hard work and learning and grinding, you start moving up the curve faster. But then once you're successful, then there's a temptation to take the foot off the gas or enjoy the finer things in life, or just focus on other things, be it other than what got you there. And so I think what we experienced, many other companies experienced, Bill Campbell experienced in Netscape, this sort of seeds, like success plants the seeds of failure in terms of like complacency or entitlement, or taking your eye off of what got you to be successful in the first place. And so, yeah, I kind of went from earning a lot of the early stage startup founder merit badges to earning the stagnation and irrelevance merit badge, and now like the turnaround merit badge. And like part of that is the turnaround playbook. Like, okay, first is just like getting out of this like delusional state where you think you're great, like it's just sort of splashing cold water on everyone and be like, look, we haven't shipped any, like, last 3 years, like the only thing our customers have really meaningfully seen from our product is a price increase. Like, what the hell are we doing? And so, and a lot of it is like getting back to like, hey, we have to focus on craft. We have to embrace like a growth mindset and learning. We have to stop blaming external factors or displacing blame. Like, we have to be a high agency culture. And so there's a cultural transformation that you have to personally embody and be clear about. And then, in our case, we had to like reboot the whole exec team. So we've had all the time getting the right kind of leadership team in place for sort of the end of chapter 2 and 3. And part of what happens in conjunction with a lot of the cultural stuff I just talked about is also you can have this as the talent flywheel's flying forward and flies in reverse. You have a new set of issues where you get all these amazing people in the company, but they want to work for Facebook, not MySpace. So you start having retention problems when the narrative goes negative. So we start like bleeding talent, and then it's also really hard to hire people for the same reasons. And especially, as I think about where the big lessons from chapter 2 that we've addressed in chapter 3, the seniority gap is something that can accumulate because the talent much of the talent can kind of fly to the next, shiny thing. And what you do in response typically is like you promote a lot of people internally, which is sort of good for them. It seems good for them in the short term because they're just getting a lot more authority and responsibility quickly. So people like that on day one, but it's a problem because suddenly people are, solving problems through trial and error, or things maybe new to them that are not new to the industry. And suddenly, known knowns to the industry are like unknown unknowns to those leaders. And then usually you can get around that by hiring a layer of experienced execs, or having like enough of them in the company. But in the sort of talent wars of the late teens, we were in the situation, as were many companies, where any exec you talked to with any experience had like 5 offers from FANG companies for like 3 times the comp and a third of the workload, or like 10 offers from like pre-IPO startups at like C-level roles. And these are like offers in hand. And so like the only thing that really worked to even just like keep the lights on was basically giving people like double promotions so that they could justify someone who's a director at company X, like making him a VP at Dropbox. And then you had to do that because like they literally had offers in hand of like many millions of dollars a year. And otherwise you just hired like no one. That cooled off a lot after the correction in SaaS, after we got more of our kind of vision straight, and certainly after we've been working on things like Dash. But that seniority gap is really rough, where where you need to have enough experienced people in the company who can then train your high potential people. And again, that sounds obvious, but it's like very difficult to do that in an environment where the talent flywheel is going in your direction and then starts flying away from you really quickly. And then through the battlefield promotions and these sort of like double promotions on hiring, you can end up in a situation where there's a huge kind of voltage drop in terms of like people's matching between what your company needs and what they know how to do. And that also doesn't mean like hire only experienced people either, because then you're sort of splicing in a lot of like outside DNA into your organism. And but what you want is to keep it like roughly in balance. I mean, 60-40, 40-60, 50-50, whatever. But your high potential people also lose out if they don't have experienced people to learn from. So that's a little bit, I think that was a big part of the stagnation. Again, it's not because the people, but this was something that I was doing to my team. So it's not them, or certainly on my watch. So, but I think it's a dynamic you have to be careful of. Like, do we have the right balance of like, people who are like super high potential and talented, but doing their thing for the first time? Are they paired with people who have been there, done that? This is not the biggest job of their life, and that they can help those people up the learning curve faster, such that the aggregate learning curve or the aggregate learning rate of your company is what it needs to be.
Oh, man, I feel like there's a book here of lessons for founders, things that you never hear about until you become a founder.
Mind the seniority gap.
Like, that's one of so many. People think about becoming founders. They start companies. Oh, I'm going to start a company. Here we go. And then, they think about that first part of the journey that you talked about. And most people don't even get that part. And like the best case scenario is you experience a ton of growth. And then the way you described it to me previously is like you kind of hit the final bosses where you're showing all the success. And then they're like, oh, I see. There's a big market here. Let's go after it. And you're battling Apple and Google and Microsoft and Meta. And a lot of people don't think about that and how that's the future if you do well.
Yeah, every time you move up a league, your reward is a stronger and better opponent, and potentially a more unlevel playing field. So, and like that's just the way it is. Like, and you can't control that. All you can control is how you respond. And so you want your company's response to be to like embrace that challenge and use it as a mechanism to get stronger. Easy to say, hard to do.
Yeah. So maybe just to start reflecting on some of the lessons from this journey, because there's a lot here. Like one question people may be wondering is should I even be a founder? Should I start a company? A lot of people, like, there's a lot of pain that you've been sharing of the challenge of starting companies. What do you tell people that are asking you, like, hey, should I start a company? Am I right to be a founder? Is there any advice there that you could share?
I don't know what made me want to be a founder. I just sort of showed up that way. So, and so there's probably some like chemical imbalance of some form that causes people to do it. But I had a lot of kind of insecurity about, should I be a CEO? And because coming from the technical side, because I was like, I can do the engineering and technology, but all I know about being a CEO is like, I do not know how to do all of those things that CEOs do. And I do not look like that. I do not talk like that. It's intimidating. So I think first is, it doesn't have to be like an all or nothing decision. I mean, obviously it's a all encompassing decision to start a company, but you'll have many points along the way where you can keep calibrating. And I think the biggest thing is, or advice I got from one of the founders of a company where I worked was like, I was like, oh, should I be CEO? Should I not be CEO? Should I be CTO? He's like, look, just try it, be CEO, see how it goes. And, initially I thought, I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to get the company to like, 100 million valuation, and the treadmill will just be going faster and faster and faster and faster. And instead of just getting thrown off of it, I'll just like hit stop and like retire. And I thought that sounded like a great plan. But then moving to the Bay Area, you suddenly meet, like, you throw a rock and hit 10 people who have done that. And what do you learn? Like, this was just shocking to me, because I talked to one of the advisors I mentioned earlier. He's like, yeah, the day I sold my company was the saddest day of my life. I'm like, what? As a 24-year-old. And he's like, yeah, well, I just felt like the company had kind of drifted away from what it was supposed to be. And I just didn't like it. I think they're sort of in the trough of the founder mode trough, where you're sort of like, wait, things are like screwed up and it's on my watch, but I'm not really sure what happened. And what do I do about it? So I think burnout is the biggest thing that will sort of kill you. And so I think that's why like these coping mechanisms and like getting your own head right is important. But if you do that, then it's also this like amazing experience. And then often so many founders go back and start another company and another company. And you don't have to, but there's a reason that people do that because it's just a lot of rewarding aspects of it. Building great things with great people that impact huge populations. It's like a really, what I found is that founders keep doing this because they love it in some way, or at least have like a love-hate relationship with it, or can't imagine something else that they would otherwise be doing. And I'm probably the same way. But I think to get through that, you have to Ben Horowitz also said the hardest thing for a CEO is to manage your own psychology. We've talked a lot about first you have to be aware of what your psychology is. And then how do you make sure you're not like resenting or hating your company or yourself and view. And I think that the hardest thing for a founder, challenge is not optional. You're going to be challenged, but the suffering is optional. You don't actually have to suffer. Look, there's crunch periods or times where it's taxing, but it doesn't have to be this experience suffering all the way or burning out or being really angry and sad all the time. Although, certainly in my experience that I did get in periods where I was just sad and angry all the time. So you need to figure out how do you work your way out of that.
So along those lines, I'm curious so you've shared a few things that have helped you level up as a leader and push through that. You mentioned meditation, Bill Campbell, a coach. You mentioned a few books. What has helped you continue to level up and stay ahead of where the company needs you? And it sounds like, sometimes you fell behind, sometimes you're ahead. What are some tips for founders that are trying to stay ahead of where things are going?
Well, I think first thing is and I think a theme that's carried throughout a lot of these different chapters is you have to figure out what game you're playing, and what the rules are when the game keeps changing. So I like, in addition to, the Enneagram or coding, I also like a long time video game player. And there's a great game called everybody's familiar with StarCraft. It's an awesome game. I think it has many lessons and riddles for an aspiring entrepreneur, many parallels with running a company. I'll save that for another one. But this idea mindshare is a big resource. It's not actually how much money or economy or land or whatever, or
actions per
military.
minute.
Yeah, it's how much you can only do so much or think about so much, your attention. But that's actually not the big lesson. When in StarCraft and other games, there's this concept of there's there's micro and macro. And I would add to that, there's also the meta game. Okay, so what's that? So micro in these games, something like StarCraft is all right, can you click really fast and move your people and build things really quickly? And it's the mechanics, every second, how many hundreds of things are you doing per minute, or how many things are you doing per second? And that's sort of a conditioning and practice and one kind of thing. Then there's the macro game. Come back to the micro examples. In a product context or in a startup context, that might be things all right, it's often the stuff around product design and technology and distribution, right? So, early founders especially are going to be totally fixated on here's how I make this great design, and here's how the engineering works, and here's how we get users, and here's how our sales motion works, or here's how our viral loop works, or things like that. And it's very in the details. And then there's kind of the macro game, all right? So in StarCraft, that might be things clicking a lot is important, but overall you're really managing your economy. So do you have more expansions and resources than the other player? Are you building up your military? Are you getting your balance of the investment in economy and military rights? Are you scouting? Do you know what the other person's doing? It's more strategic and conceptual. So things in the startup realm that would feel more like that are more all right, not just the mechanics of how does this feature work, but more all right, what's the business model? What's the market? What's the who are my competitors? How do I differentiate myself? How's this all going to evolve over time as the category goes from super high growth to more mature, things like that. And you respond, okay, we got to go from one product to multiple products, so then we have to reorganize the company that way, and we blah blah blah. And then I'd say there's also the meta game, which in gaming is a pretty specific thing. It's either some combination of the game itself gets updated so that as the creators they make this unit stronger, and this area unit stronger, and this ground unit weaker, and sort of try to keep this big system in balance. And then also as this community of players figures out new strategies and sort of this big, repeated game of rock, paper, scissors, people figure out, okay, this one strategy is now categorically better. And it's always this kind of adversarial thing that's always shifting. And so playing StarCraft in 2020 is pretty different from playing StarCraft in 2015 or 2010, because both the players are shifting and the game itself is shifting. And the game is usually not shifting a lot. So it's really more of a, ecological effect. So I think it's like super important. And then, in a startup context, what's the metagame? Well, I'd say some of it is just like business cycles. So I think you'll have, as you see, like there's like this boom in the late teens in SaaS and in tech. There's a bit of an AI boom happening right now. It's not that different from what, or parts of it are not that different from what happened in the .com era in 99, 2000, or the Web 2.0 era in 2007, or others. And then you have these bust times like 2008 and 2001, et cetera. So there's like a market cycle thing that often creates similar dynamics where it's like, 5 years ago, every tech company was hiring the maximal number of people that it could. And then that created one talent dynamic. Now it's like a lot of companies are keeping headcount flat or negative. So that's just like a very different thing. And so, but even those are kind of cyclical. Then you want to identify like, how is this like game of like business actually fundamentally, permanently changing? So for example, we launched Dash. We usually do like a press thing, conventional press, tech press. We got like almost no coverage for it. And yet all the stuff we did on social or going direct was like way, way, way more impactful. And it's not just Dropbox or in tech, but it's also like, presidential election, like all the candidates are on podcasts, right? They're not so much. I mean, yes, they're on CNN too, but not really. So that's just like a new thing. Like, how do you, promote, how do you manage the brand of your company or launch products, things like that? The nature of marketing is changing. And that changed when in 2007 too, like instead of hiring PR firms and buying AdWords and stuff, we were creating these like viral videos, and we were using math from epidemiology to create these viral loops. In a lot of ways, Dropbox transplanted that consumer internet playbook into business software. So, but the thing is, like, you need to understand what game you're playing, and you need to get good at the micro. It's not that like the meta is more important than the macro. It's like you need to do all three at the same time. And so that's really the hard part. And then when things are shifting, because I would, and the way you know what game you're playing is to be systematic about training yourself. And probably the single most useful, or at least important to me, piece of advice I could give is like, you have to figure out how to keep your personal growth curve ahead of the company's growth curve. The single most important, impactful thing for me has been reading, because talk about this micro, macro, metagame sort of abstractions like that. This is the kind of stuff you can learn from history. Like learning what happened in Netscape ended up being pretty important to what happened to Dropbox in 2014. Learning what happened to Procter and Gamble and selling makeup ended up actually being pretty relevant. So I think having like a broad information diet is really important. And I've collated a list of books that were really impactful to me. You can find a way to share that. All right, I'd be happy to share that. But in a lot of ways, you're basically, as a CEO, you have to be like right about a lot of things, especially and including things you haven't done before. And I think from that perspective, at least I'd say there's like things that are challenging for your head and things that are challenging for your heart. The head challenge is one that's more like, all right, how do I cultivate wisdom really quickly? And so, in addition to like a lot of technical books about here's how you do marketing or product or management or things like that, some of it can be kind of around like higher level, like almost philosophical, when it's things like Buffett or Munger or Bezos, like would be more on that end of the spectrum. And then, but it's not just reading. I think having a community of people that you can learn from is really important. And I've also found it's interesting. You learn having kind of stable of people that, are at the same stage as you, couple stages ahead, 2 years ahead, 5 years ahead, 20 years ahead.
And this is founders, other CEOs.
Other founders, yeah. Founders and CEOs, exactly. because you'll learn different things from them. So first of all, when you're in the early innings, like you actually get more like useful advice often from your peers because they're going through the same thing. So it's like, how do I raise a seed round? You're going to get a lot more out of someone who did that like a year ago or is doing that now than like if I asked Zuck, like, how do you raise a seed round? He'd be like, I don't remember, just like build a good company. And you'll see that as you talk to people at different phases. Like, I think, again, like the early stage, it's more about the micro, about the product and distribution. Then there's sort of this continuum to like, then it's about like your business model, and monetization and the financials. Then it's about like defensibility and maintaining that advantage. And as you sort of as I talk to my peers, it'd be more about the product, that was kind of the scaffold I would see over the founder. And then people that were like further out, like actually they still knew all the micro stuff and like were like had feelings about it, but they're almost like philosophical in nature, like philosophers, and just like very broad intellectually and like drawing lots of distinctions from lots of different things, like knew a lot about a lot. And I think most of the tenured founders that most of the founder CEOs who've been at it for 10, 20 years plus, I'm at 17, like almost all of them read voraciously. So I think combination of like reading and community are the most important things. But then the last thing is being like systematic about it. So in line with, or what does it mean to keep this curve ahead of your personal growth curve ahead of the company's growth curve? I think one way to do that exercise is always be working back from, right? Like in 1 year from now, what will I wish I'd been learning today? 2 years, 5 years. And often those to-do lists are pretty different, right? So in 2008, I would have been focused on just like getting users for Dropbox, but then looking ahead to, a year later, I would have been building like the first business functions in the company. And then 5 years later, I would be thinking about how do we fight with Google and Microsoft and all these other things. And then for my own skills, it would be like, 2008 would be like, how do I raise like a scaled venture round, and what do all these terms mean, and and things like that. But then how do I be a great leader, a great manager, comfortable speaking publicly, things like that. And the things that are further out are often like the most intimidating, but you also have the most time to learn them. And you often can psych yourself out in terms of like, oh, this is just like new and uncomfortable. And I just say this is one of the hard challenges. Like you're always going to have that feeling of discomfort, and instinctively what you're going to want to do is run away from it because you're human. It's like uncomfortable to like feel like, to confront these things that you're not good at or might be embarrassing or threatening. And so I think an important part of being a founder is like learning to run towards that feeling, not away from it. That's a big part of your learning rate. Is the extent to which you're like pushing yourself beyond discomfort. And then I'd say, and so like having that list of like, a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, what can I start learning today? And then recognizing these things, they're all trainable. So, in 5 weeks, you're not going to be a great guitar player or surgeon or manager or leader, but in 5 years, you can put a pretty big dent in those problems. And, people who enter college and leave college often have a lot more relevant knowledge after that experience, after those 4 years. So just sort of having that kind of growth mindset. And I'd say the last piece of it that is also tricky, in addition to sort of like going toward from a kind of heart or mindset perspective, is, going towards discomfort. And in addition to a lot of the other stuff we talked about, being like, how do you have a sense of equanimity or not sort of burning out and finding a sustainable pace. I think the other thing is like often smart people have more trouble learning than otherwise. And there's this great article it's probably my most handed out article is probably from the 70s or 80s or something, called Teaching Smart People How to Learn. Because what ends up happening is the more kind of book smart you are, or the more you are sort of identified as like gifted or intelligent as a kid, the more that identity, the more like not knowing something or being wrong is not just like not knowing something or being wrong. It's like an assault on your identity. And so I found that one of the best predictors of an exec continuing to scale is not just what they know or what they can do, but like the extent to which they can actually like be aware of their failures. and not blame or dismiss things, because like smart people have a really fast rationalization hamster. Like they can convince themselves that, well, here's how they were like technically right, even though like clearly they were wrong, or clearly the thing didn't work out. And they sort of let themselves off the hook. And all of this happens unconsciously as sort of a protective mechanism. So I think finding ways to take responsibility, or always having like a mindset of like, all right, what if I were like 100% responsible for this? Like, what if it was no one else's fault? Like, what if it's entirely in my control? And those things are never true, but that's always or with perfect hindsight, what would I have done differently? And just like owning things ends up being more painful in the short run, but then, some painful hours can save painful years. And there's a great book on that mindset stuff, The 15 Principles of Conscious Leadership, Diana Chapman and some co-authors. And she's been a coach and friend of mine. She's amazing. And so it's really helped me on that front. But really, like, how do you train your head and train your heart? There's different things you do for each, but all in service of keeping your personal growth curve ahead of the company's growth curve.
Mm-hmm. I love how tactical your advice is. There's this piece of advice of like, think, what do I need to know a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now? This reading list, this idea of having staggered, staged founders in a community to help you along this journey. This article about how smart people learn and how to get past this block. So I love just like how concrete a lot of this stuff is. So then just zooming out and maybe final reflections on this journey. As you describe this, it's basically the epitome of the hero's journey that you've been on here. Things are good. Trouble appears. You enter this other land of everyone coming at you, trying to squash you in every direction, battling them, and then emerging now into this new land with all the things you've learned, kind of coming back to the original idea of what Dropbox could have been. So I think that's partly why it's so interesting, is it's the epitome.
But we still got to
story.
make it fully out of the.
That's right.
We're like on our way up. We're clawing our way back up.
You got the dragon is still out there.
Yeah,
The incumbents still exist.
Well, and by the way, that's
yeah.
like, it will always be like that. Like it's you're never like done with that. There's always, it's not like you reach a top, or you don't have to if you don't want it.
Yeah, and it makes me think about, as you're talking, like people think about product market fit, and a lesson from this journey is just like product market fit is not a binary. You will have it now. You got it, and you have it, and will last forever. It's like constantly being broken by other people, or if there's something you've discovered that is a big market. Any maybe final reflection on the story you've shared, things that might be helpful to people, just the journey you've been on, that might be helpful to founders who are going through this right now or will probably go through this?
I think it's important to remember we're all really lucky to be able to do this kind of work, right? And the things that I got out of when I was 18, the things I thought I would get out of starting a company would have been the things you would think. It would be like, oh, I'll be like really well known or really rich or build these awesome things. Okay, I think there's benefits to that, but I think but what I've like grown to appreciate a lot more is over time is, this thing, or the experience and the journey of starting a company can really be a forge for like a better character, or like there's a lot of what you learn here is transferable in many different domains. Like I just had a little kid, Charlie. He's 1 year old. So I know we're both in kind of new dad mode. But I'm like, it will make me. It's made me a better husband. It make me a better father. Make me a better person. And then I just say lesson like there's like no easy button where things are just up and to the right. And so like, don't look for one. And don't feel bad if like things are difficult. But ultimately, like one of the biggest surprises about like being able to spend time with all these like interesting people and founder CEOs who've created these iconic companies is, at the end of the day, they do it because they love it. And so I think learning to sort of decouple, that doesn't mean they're always having a good time at all. Most of them use metaphors like, Jensen or Elon, like chewing broken glass, staring into the abyss, and like, and yet, for a lot of these people, there's at the end of the day, like nothing they'd rather do. So I think finding the good in that.
I'm very excited to follow the next chapter of your journey. I am really thankful that you shared these stories. I think this is going to be helpful to a lot of people. I think this is a story that people study for a long time because it's common and not talked about much. So Drew, thank you so much for being here. For folks that want to maybe check out what you're building, anything you want to share, where should they go?
I'm just Drew Houston on all the socials. And then, we got a new product, Dropbox Dash, dropbox.com/dash. Right now it's for companies. We'll have a downloadable version you can just get on your phone or your computer soon. But yeah, Lenny, this is awesome. Super fun. Really big fan of what you do.
Awesome. Same. Drew, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find all past episodes or learn more about the show at lennyspodcast.com. See you in the next episode.